One Roger's father passed away when he and his sister were still very young. Afterwards, his mother begged him to become a shaman, claiming he possessed rare potential and spirits would always shield him from harm. She warned that straying from this sacred path would bring absolute ruin. She forced him to study ancient rituals, poetry, and even forbidden spirit magic. They were completely foreign, but the young man already had other plans. None of those spiritual teachings interested him because he had his own grand dreams instead. Instead, he poured all his energy into modern science, building a quiet, successful career over 10 years. He finally blended into society. Then, tragedy struck out of nowhere. A speeding car brutally ran him over. It was an end that is incredibly hard to believe. But his mother was right. Real trouble did find him, and fast. That was barely the start of his strange fate. The true miracle was coming. Roger was actually reborn in another world, realizing that death is not always the final end. In this new life, he discovered that his mother's words were entirely true. Dying was the tragic, eye-opening experience that finally forced him to believe his mother's warning. Experience is a harsh teacher, but now he has to use those very skills. With a sharp slap, Roger slammed his heavy textbook shut to capture everyone's attention in class. "Class is starting," he announces. "Today, they will draw a complex magic circle. Can you believe this former scientist is now teaching at a magic academy?" An insane chain of events brought him here. Flash back to the busy platform. Roger stood amidst a massive, bustling crowd of eager travelers waiting to board the magic steam train. The conductor quickly checked everyone's tickets, wishing them all a safe journey. Soon it was Roger's turn, and the friendly railway worker greeted him warmly with a smile. He showed his ticket. After stamping it, the conductor nodded in thanks. Roger thanked him politely and immediately made his way toward the busy, steam-filled train carriages. He walked down the narrow corridor, looking for his assigned seat. His ticket directed him to seat 43, located within the fourth car's third passenger compartment. Before long, he found the exact cabin. Roger slid the heavy door open quietly. Inside sat an elderly gentleman, looking exceptionally relaxed and settled into his comfortable window seat. The old traveler looked up from his newspaper, offering a polite greeting to the newcomer. Roger offered a polite bow in return before finally sliding into the empty seat across from him. After a short wait, the locomotive finally lurched forward and departed. The heavy steel wheels clattered loudly against the iron rails as the massive steam engine accelerated. Their journey was quite long, taking them through vast and beautiful lands. The slow train chugged past majestic mountains, completely blanketed in thick, pure layers of winter snow. The pine trees were also covered in heavy frost. Roger sat quietly. Roger quietly observed his traveling companion, seeing that both of them were now deeply reading. Eventually, the young man got distracted, turning his gaze to the traveler. The elderly gentleman was staring intently at his morning paper, entirely focused on the front page. Those photos made him realize the civil war in Utah was finally over. The headlines proudly declared that the princess's faction had completely won the final, decisive battle. Roger smiled softly at the paper, murmuring that the long conflict had ended. The elderly traveler offered a warm, knowing smile, slowly lowering his newspaper as he agreed, but then his expression turned solemn as he softly sighed, agreeing that it was indeed so. Roger remained quiet, remembering how aggressively the princes had been drafting innocent local youths into battle. The prince's faction was forcefully drafting soldiers, making this victory a massive relief. Thankfully, that meant the war ended pretty quickly. He apologized again and realized he had completely forgotten to introduce himself. His name was Roger Chili. The old man introduced himself in return, but gently explained that he had no family name. He asked to just be called Gerard. Seeing Roger's fancy manners, Gerard guessed he was of noble blood. Roger admitted he was just a fallen noble and told him not to worry. The old man nodded in understanding, and Roger asked where Gerard was traveling. Gerard revealed he was heading to Linenbone, the magnificent capital of the empire. He heard it was a pretty famous hotspot for travelers. Roger smiled, noting that the Exilian Empire was renowned for its advanced magical engineering. Just seeing that alone made the trip totally worth it. Roger mentioned he was also heading to Leatherwolf to join the prestigious Theon's academy. Gerard was deeply impressed that someone so young could secure a spot there. He must be quite an outstanding expert, which only made Roger blush. The young man only got embarrassed and claimed he was just incredibly lucky. Gerard smiled, telling him that countless others would kill to be in his shoes. He should be proud. Roger smiled warmly and thanked him for the kind words. Roger then steered the conversation back, asking if Gerard had heard the latest war rumors. He was referring to a very specific figure who had just emerged. A mysterious mercenary who basically won the war for the princess. They say he had no formal training in magic or any fancy knighthood. He was just a traveling mercenary named Machevely. Hearing this, Gerard looked down. He quietly murmured that he understood. His voice grew ice-cold. Roger noticed his calm reaction and pointed out that Gerard did not seem surprised. Gerard shrugged it off, saying it sounded like nothing but cheap gossip. But Roger knew better. That name was legendary. The Wanderer searched the world for one goal, and that was the protagonist's past name. The old man quietly broke the silence, cutting off Roger's deep thoughts right then. Looking at the young noble with a gentle smile, he asked a question. Was Roger actually going to teach a class at Theon's academy? Roger confirmed it, proudly adding that he would be teaching the second-year students. Gerard was genuinely impressed. Starting straight with the second-year students was a massive deal. He was capable, highly capable, but then everything changed. The old man's expression suddenly hardened. Roger instantly noticed the shift. He grew anxious. Had something gone terribly wrong? Gerard simply stared out the window, telling the boy to wait a second. He looked graveside. Something bad was about to happen. Just a few seconds after his warning, a massive shockwave hit the train. A sudden, deafening explosion rocked the entire train. The heavy carriages began to violently tilt, throwing passengers off balance as Roger panicked. He screamed, demanding to know what was happening and if the engine blew. Gerard quickly calmed him, explaining that the engine was protected by heavy magic. The old man strained his ears, his keen senses picking up an imminent danger. He suddenly yelled. They had walked straight into a trap. Roger gasped in absolute shock, wondering who could possibly target this train. Maybe they just want to rob the rich, but this explosion, that is bad. If they set off this blast, everything is ruined, all of it. And if that is true, there is definitely a dangerous mage among them. Time to hide or get off this train. Roger slides the door open. Wait here, he tells the old man he will check the hallway first. He slowly peers out. He scans the quiet hallway for any signs of trouble. Nothing. He whispers back to Gerard that the entire carriage is completely empty. Gerard steps out into the empty car. Are the other passengers actually safe? Don't worry, Roger points out that the passenger rooms are sealed with magic. Gerard sighs. That is no guarantee when dealing with real professional thieves. It is highly dangerous to stay here if they can bypass those spells. What if the robbers use the exact same magic to break their defenses? Wait, Roger asks if the explosion definitely came from the third carriage. If that is true, then why are there no robbers in their carriage yet? Gerard thinks for a second. If I were them, I would go elsewhere. They would head straight for the front. He contemplates the layout of the train. Of course, that is where all the wealthy first-class passengers are riding. Talk about a lucky break. They are very fortunate to be in the fourth. Gerard urges them to escape out the back and wait for the border guards. Suddenly, a shadow drops. A masked robber appears right at the window. He swings down from above, kicking straight through the glass pane with force. Roger acts instantly, pulling the old man back as shards fly everywhere. Get behind me, the masked thug glares at them with a completely maniacal look. His eyes are completely wild. Seeing this, Gerard immediately tenses up in shock. This looks incredibly bad. The bandit draws his weapon to attack them. He prepares to launch a lethal assault on the two passengers standing there. Roger knows things are about to get bloody. He takes action immediately. He unleashes a burst of magic, throwing his attacker back with absolute ease. The bandit is launched backward, crashing hard into the far end of the car. Gerard just stands there, watching the sudden clash unfold in utter astonishment. He gasps, asking Roger if he actually just killed the man. Not at all. Roger calmly explains he only disarmed and incapacitated him. Roger approaches the fallen enemy. Gerard warns him to stay back because of danger. It is fine, Roger reassures him he only wants to ask some questions. He steps right over the robber, pointing his heavy cane directly at him. He demands to know exactly why the thief broke into this particular wagon. The thief remains quiet for a long moment, letting out a low grunt. Then he bursts into a manic laugh, quickly testing the young hero's patience. Roger loses his temper, snapping that he did not give him permission to laugh. He commands him to answer, but the bandit only glares with insane eyes. He screams that they are filthy humans, promising to slaughter them all. With a manic grin, he rips open his coat to show his chest. Strapped to his body is a massive bundle of dynamite and a detonator. Worst of all, they can see the flashing timer. There is almost no time left. Only 1 second remains on the clock. Gerard completely panics and screams in terror. He told Sir Roger to hide immediately, barely a second after the words left his mouth. A massive explosion shook the train, sending wild streams of fire roaring everywhere. Though the first blast was devastating, the locomotive somehow managed to stay on track. But right as it clung to the mountain slope, a second, even bigger explosion hit. Slowly, the thick columns of rising smoke and towering flames began to clear away. Gerard actually survived the impact, huddled on the floor with his head covered tightly. He realized he was completely unharmed, immediately turning to check if Sir Roger was okay. Asking if the old man was okay, but when Roger finally looked up, he saw what lay in front of him. He was instantly struck with pure dread. He looked around, but his diary was gone, and the entire compartment was in ruins. Only the shattered right side of the train carriage remained where they had been standing. Slowly, he began to step closer to the gaping hole left by the blast. To look outside, calling out for his compartment mate and hoping for a reply. But as he did, he reached up to touch his own cheek and felt something incredibly strange. A portion of his face was literally starting to peel away. Realizing how bad this looked, he quickly began pressing the skin back into place. His magical disguise was falling apart, and there was no hiding it anymore. Needless to say, Gerard was furious, complaining that this custom suit was totally ruined. Finally, he decided to peel the damaged mask completely off his face. Beneath the fake skin, the face of a completely different man was revealed. Looking ahead, he could only sigh and wonder why trouble always seemed to follow him around. Honestly, there was no grand reason behind the alias he chose. He simply adopted the name Machiavelli from a famous figure in his past life. To travel the world in peace, he constantly had to reinvent his entire identity. Otherwise, keeping out of trouble while moving from place to place would be impossible. This specific persona was supposed to keep things quiet, but what an exhausting day. He had already drawn way too much attention for someone trying to stay hidden. Luckily, the princess and her royal soldiers were currently celebrating their recent victory. Taking advantage of their lowered guard, he slipped away to catch the Linderbrunn train. Yet our hero could only let out a heavy sigh, completely exhausted by the sheer absurdity of it all. Why did madness like this always find him? With a bitter chuckle, Machiavelli tossed aside the broken mask he was holding. Pushing those thoughts aside, he tossed away the ruined mask he was still holding. Staring out into the distance, he silently hoped that Roger would rest in peace. It was absolutely insane that anyone would orchestrate such a bold daytime ambush. Looking over the damage, he realized he never expected them to detonate a bomb. No ordinary group of trained robbers would ever resort to such extreme measures. This was clearly the work of a complete psychopath determined to slaughter everyone, which meant their real target might not have been the passengers at all. They wanted to destroy the train itself. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him. At that moment, a nervous train employee approached, quietly asking if the man was okay. Machiavelli turned around as the employee looked at the destruction in absolute horror. He calmly explained that the train had just been hit by heavily armed robbers. It looked like they were making a run for the very first carriage. And honestly, it was probably best for the staff to stay far away. He needed to evacuate the passengers through the very last car, turning around. He told the county worker to escape too, but the man suddenly lunged forward, grabbing him by the throat and slamming him to the floor. This old man sneered and asked what he thought he was doing, but McCavely's expression turned ice cold. He asked if the old man really believed this pathetic game would trick him. After all, bandits do not just attack random passing trains, especially one equipped with such high-level defense spells. There is no way. The reality of the situation is simple. This is an inside job pulled off with help from an insider who knows the train's entire security setup. The old employee gasped, completely shocked by how quickly he had been read. Realizing that things were rapidly spinning out of control, the traitor's face fell. And he immediately decided to play his last card. He slipped out a hidden blade from his right sleeve, but McCavely was already watching him. He grabbed the sharp blade with his bare hand, shouting at the traitor to freeze. The old man was surprisingly fast, but who was he really working for? McCavely wondered what his real goal was here. The old worker struggled up, using his weapon to threaten him, warning that staying quiet was his only option. Otherwise, he would end up dead right on the spot. But just then, after taking a few steps, McCavely sensed something strange and whipped his head around. He heard a bizarre, echoing sound that felt incredibly familiar. Did he guess right? McCavely quickly pushed the worker away and leaped back to protect himself. In that split second, the old man's body was riddled with dozens of bullets. McCavely managed to take cover, wondering when the traitor had signaled his allies. He had been watching him closely. They must have had a backup plan. He realized what they did. This was the only option they had left. A setup. Suddenly, the train car door was kicked off its hinges. Several heavily armed bandits burst inside, scanning the area with their rifles. One of them scanned the room in disbelief, demanding to know how there was a survivor left. It seemed impossible that anyone could dodge that kind of gunfire. McCavely calmly stood up, telling them they never had a chance of killing him. But the bandits raised their guns, and the leader ordered them to shoot. McCavely remained perfectly still, watching their every movement with absolute focus. McCavely stood his ground, calmly observing their movements. Trust me, he is ready. Every single bandit immediately pulled their triggers, but absolutely nothing happened. Shocked, they began frantically inspecting their weapons, wondering why they jammed. One robber yelled out in confusion, asking why his automatic rifle would not fire. Their leader stared ahead, realizing the mysterious guy was doing something to them. It was magic. McCavely was actively channeling his mana to jam the weapons. He unleashed his spell, and a powerful shockwave erupted across the room. The enemy realized he was a wizard as he used his magic to knock the guns away. At that moment, McCavely suddenly sensed another strange energy. He quickly turned his head, feeling a powerful force rushing out of nowhere. A gust of razor-sharp wind sliced through the air directly toward him. The defensive magic in McCavely's hand shattered into pieces under the pressure. He stared at his trembling palm, wondering what kind of monster did this. It was a magic suppressor. Suddenly, another man stepped out from the opposite carriage and scoffed, admitting he never expected to find an actual mage on this train. Young hero found himself pinned from both sides. Then, the enemy leader loudly ordered him to surrender without making a single move if he wanted a quick, painless death. Machiavelli locked eyes with the speaker and instantly sensed his overwhelming aura. This guy was no ordinary magic caster. To make matters even worse, there was a high probability that this foe was a fourth-rank powerhouse just like him, but he had never seen this face before. 10 minutes had passed since that massive explosion, and they were still deep within the treacherous Arat Mountains. Machiavelli knew he could not just stall and wait for backup to arrive. With his back against the wall, he made his move, leaping straight into a gap. The enemy mage gasped, ordering his henchman to go check the ladder. The goon quickly obliged and peered over the edge to find him. Staring down into the massive, dark hole, the guard yelled out that there was absolutely nothing there. The leader figured the young mage must have actually jumped. He assumed they simply terrified the kid, causing him to flee, but he did not even get to finish his thought before he was brutally cut down. The survivor panicked, screaming at the top of his lungs that the target was on the roof. The other bandits recoiled in disbelief, wondering how he could possibly climb up. Without using flight magic, how could anyone pull that off on a speeding train? The enemy wizard roared at them to shut up and locate the intruder immediately. His new magic suppressors limited their own options, so he ordered a small group to guard their current position while the rest of the unit rushed toward the front. Suddenly, bullets tore through the ceiling as several bandits blindly sprayed the roof. Indeed, Machiavelli was up there, and hearing the gunfire, he sprinted across the metal roof. Naturally, the heavy footsteps echoing overhead gave away his exact position, and the leader shouted that he was fleeing toward the rear, commanding them to pursue him. To catch him, they had to breach the door to the next carriage. As soon as a bandit twisted the handle, a blinding explosion ripped through the doorway. The blast blew several men backward, prompting a terrified survivor to scream. His stunned ally demanded to know how that mage could set a trap so fast. The enemy commander gritted his teeth, feeling completely outclassed by this opponent. This target was nothing like the typical, fragile magic casters he usually fought. The boy's speed, precision, and calculated moves were on an entirely different level. And honestly, this kind of ruthless efficiency makes him feel more like a hunter. Rather than a simple scholar of magic, perhaps he was actually an elite mercenary. Just then, a bizarre metallic clanking echoed from the outside coupling. The boss picked up the sound too, his eyes widening as realization struck him. He lunged forward frantically, screaming to his men that they were in deep trouble. That crazy bastard was decoupling the passenger carriages to make his escape. The leader cursed himself for failing to predict this incredibly simple escape route. From the very beginning, their slippery opponent had no intention of staying to fight. The bewildered bandits stared at the door and watched the gap slowly widen. Within seconds, the connected carriage vanished entirely into the thick mountain fog, leaving nothing behind but a silent, white abyss as the train raced ahead. They had already separated and stopped, leaving a massive gap between them. The distance between them was massive. Suddenly, the bandit leader realized his critical mistake. Things were bad. They realized they missed him and couldn't jump off the train. Too late, there was no chasing him now, so their mage spoke up. He promised to memorize his face and hunt him down no matter what. He was determined to kill him, but his face instantly went pale. A sudden, terrifying chill ran down his spine. Something was incredibly wrong. What was this pressure? He spun around to find the source. He wondered what kind of insane magical energy this was and where it came from. And when the man finally spins around, well, he was definitely not ready for this. Standing right there was Machiavelli, gathering a massive amount of magical energy for a spell. Machiavelli raised his hand, aiming directly at them. The enemy mage panicked, wondering where he came from. Was this another trap? Before they could figure it out, our hero unleashed his spell. Machiavelli fired a devastating beam of pure energy straight at them. The light spread instantly across the field, locking onto its targets with terrifying speed. The enemy mage saw the incoming attack and tried to conjure a magical defense. But realizing the sheer destructive force heading his way, he knew it was useless. In absolute panic, he screamed at his comrades to run for their lives. But by the time the words left his mouth, it was already far too late. A split second later, Machiavelli's spell reached full power and detonated. The enemies ahead were completely wiped out, leaving nothing but a thick smell of burning ash. Machiavelli stared at the destruction, believing this was finally the end of the battle. However, the leader of the bandits was somehow still standing on his feet. His left arm and half of his face were severely burned, left in a pitiful state. Machiavelli looked at him, genuinely surprised that the man had managed to survive that hit. The bleeding leader spat back, calling him a monster and demanding to know why he did it. He asked how he could murder them without feeling even a shred of guilt. He claimed the men Machiavelli slaughtered were nothing but true patriots of this nation. Men who were only fighting to bring peace to their beloved land. Machiavelli just stared, realizing this guy was more delusional than he thought. The half-dead mage, looking like a living corpse, demanded to know what he meant. Machiavelli pointed out the obvious: they were the ones who tried to kill him first. Yet now the bandit had the nerve to stand there and accuse him of atrocities. He told him to save that pathetic speech for his dead comrades lying around them. Besides, the bandit leader was the one who swore to track him down and end him. So he really had no right to play the victim after making those threats. Machiavelli admitted that under normal circumstances, he might have actually let him go. But unfortunately, this man had already seen his face, and that was a massive problem. To keep his identity safe, he needed to resolve everything right here and now. The bandit leader seethed with rage and opened his mouth to scream at him. But suddenly, sharp ice erupted through his body, completely freezing him on the spot. Machiavelli watched in shock, entirely caught off guard by this unexpected sudden intervention. He held his breath, waiting to see what mysterious figure would appear next. From right behind the frozen bandit's back, a dangerous new presence emerged. He stood in absolute silence, completely frozen with fear as he watched. A distinct sound of approaching footsteps echoes from up ahead and right on cue. A knight slowly steps into view, the killer of the fallen man. The survivor watches in horror. As Frost rapidly crawls across the storage locker, wondering if he stands any chance of surviving. He must be terrified, but there is absolutely no need to panic anymore. Smiling confidently, the knight announces that the Knights of Cold Steel have finally arrived. Meanwhile, in another train car, tension spikes as a fierce firefight breaks out. Dozens of stray bullets pierce right through the passenger compartment while the bandits scramble. Firing back frantically, the panicked outlaws shout, wondering if their targets are already inside. How could anyone deploy magic in this kind of brutal storm? Yet one knight stands right before them, using his protective magic to effortlessly deflect a barrage of bullets. After instantly putting down his attackers, he wastes no time channeling his power elsewhere. Sprinting forward, he launches a relentless counterattack against the enemies still shooting at him. A bandit spots the charge. He panics, utterly overwhelmed by the knight's incredible speed. Meanwhile, on the other side, another criminal is swiftly struck down by a second knight. Having quickly neutralized his first target, the warrior immediately pivots to the next. The remaining bandit instantly realizes what's coming, and fear completely paralyzes his body. Terrified, his desperate screams are the only sounds left echoing in the train. With all the hijackers eliminated, the victorious knight steps up to give his report. He confirms that the second carriage has been completely secured and cleared of hostiles. The soldier sent to the first car also returns, declaring it safe and the passengers unharmed. A soldier turns toward the lieutenant, requesting permission to deliver a full report. At this very moment, the entire locomotive has been brought back under complete control. The commanding officer commends them on a job well done, telling them to ease up. and told his subordinates to stand down, ensuring the passengers could travel to the next station. In complete peace, soon, the train finally pulls into the bustling Leatherwalk station. A massive crowd already waits patiently on the platform, eager to board the train. Meanwhile, our main character remains inside his private compartment, staring quietly out the window. He watches the passing crowds outside. Suddenly, the compartment door slides wide open. He looks up to find a young woman stepping in, looking highly concerned. She quickly asks if he is unhurt and if the terrorists harmed him. McCavely calmly replies that he is perfectly fine, thanks to the Knights of Cold Steel. He was merely lost in thought. Hearing this, she expresses her genuine relief. With a warm smile, she admits she really should have introduced herself first. She gracefully introduces herself, announcing her name as the Honorable Veronica DeVille. The hero sighs, preparing to introduce himself to the polite lady in return. Suddenly, a stranger steps in, politely interrupting them with an apology. The lieutenant shifts her focus to the newcomer, asking if he requires something. The stranger asks if she is indeed the commander of the Knights of Cold Steel. She proudly confirms her rank, introducing herself as Lieutenant Veronica DeVille once more. The man presents his badge, introducing himself as Officer Jason from the local department. Representing the Leatherwalk police, he is fully aware of the emergency that just occurred. He mentions the brutal train raid back in the snowy mountains of Arret. The lieutenant reassures him that her forces have already eliminated every single outlaw. Jason expresses his gratitude, but notes a bizarre discrepancy in their initial report. Something doesn't add up, leaving the young lieutenant thoroughly puzzled by his words. The officer began investigating, noting how quickly the intruder spotted that exact train. Magic or not, they shouldn't have bypassed those defenses so easily. Veronica was completely shocked by the report, and the officer added that an insider likely helped them bypass security. A secret accomplice must have been on board the train to help those intruders pass through. Veronica thought about it, nodding at what seemed like a highly logical conclusion. But the officer quickly made sure to point out this was merely his assumption. Because of this, they wouldn't detain people and would simply verify everyone's identity. The knight immediately agreed, stating she fully understood why this precaution was completely necessary. She then turned to the protagonist, asking if he heard. Compliance was key. If he answered honestly, everything would go smoothly. The guy kept smiling, offering absolutely no response to her question. But inside, he was panicking, knowing he was in deep trouble. He was in a massive bind, though his fake identity as Gerard was completely spotless. Nothing seemed suspicious about the 45-year-old persona he played. That was exactly why he managed to pass through the ticket control without raising flags. He sat legally in his seat, but a terrifying danger still loomed. The problem, his face. He looked absolutely nothing like a 45-year-old man. If his cover got blown, his true identity would be exposed. In that case, they would drag him straight to the gallows to hang him. If he got lucky, they might just subject him to brutal, endless torture. Armed guards and knights flooded the area, making any escape attempt utterly impossible. And to make matters worse, this lieutenant showed absolutely zero mercy. She was smiling and chatting now, but that could change in a heartbeat. The moment they suspected him, they would chop him to pieces. Suddenly, the officer broke his train of thought, calling out to him. He asked if he was all right, politely apologizing for the delay. It had just taken him some time to retrieve the passenger manifest. There was no need to worry, they just needed to quickly verify his identity. The officer asked to see his ticket, and McCavely immediately pulled it out to hand it over. The deputy standing beside the officer noted that he was in seat 403. The officer said he would check it now. The name was Roger Chili, a 25-year-old passenger. Next was Jihad, a man listed as 40 years old. The officers then looked up, demanding to know where the second passenger was. McCavely spoke up, explaining that the man was caught in a massive explosion. The blast occurred while they were passing right through the steep mountains. During the chaos, he lost his footing and fell off the cliff. The officer stared at him intensely, remaining completely silent for a moment. McHavely sat perfectly still, suppressing his panic in order to avoid raising suspicion. Jason told him to stay put, but the knight stepped closer to intervene. She insisted he wasn't a suspect. The officer frowned, asking what she meant. She replied that he was actively fighting the terrorists when her squad arrived. She questioned if an actual traitor would ever risk his life like that. Jason was genuinely surprised, pondering her words for a moment. He agreed with her reasoning, turning to politely apologize for his suspicion. At the same time, he called him Mr. Roger, completely mistaking the old man for someone much younger. This unexpected mistake left our hero utterly astonished. He could barely believe it. The officer grumbled through the report. Was he actually the one hired? Had he actually been hired by Theon Academy? Even Veronica looked on with curiosity. They stared intently. Machevli had no idea how to answer. He paused, quickly weighing the dangerous situation currently playing out around him. With a subtle smile, he slowly rose from his seat to face them directly. Picking up his heavy suitcase, he confidently declared that it was indeed all true. He adjusted his hat and announced that he was indeed the new professor, Roger Selishi. A short while later, they stepped outside, and the officer apologized for the inconvenience. Machevli brushed it off, saying no apology was needed since he arrived here safely. It was all thanks to them, anyway. Jason then offered to guide him directly to the academy. But Machevli declined, politely reminding Jason that he was under no obligation to do so. The officer argued that the Empire's future now rested squarely in this professor's hands. How could he not escort him, though Machevli secretly wished they would just leave him alone? Hoping to slip away, he quickly claimed he had some personal business to handle first. Hearing that, the officer realized he could no longer hold the busy professor back. The officer sighed, relenting that nothing more could be done. With a polite smile, Machevli turned away, saying it was time for him to leave. Though his acquaintance with Miss Veronica was brief, he was genuinely glad to meet her. The young lady instantly smiled upon hearing such flattering words. She told Sir Roger the feeling was mutual, hinting they might cross paths again. Machevli offered no reply, simply turning around to continue on his way. He strolled off at a relaxed pace, quickly blending into the bustling crowd. With every single step forward, he felt closer to his long-awaited freedom. A surge of joy hit him as he realized he had actually pulled this off. Yet a sudden pang of anxiety hit, prompting him to offer a silent apology. He mentally apologized to the real Sir Roger, thanking him for saving his life. At least he was lucky that the photo quality back then was absolutely terrible. It made it practically impossible to distinguish him from the real Roger's snapshot. With the immediate crisis resolved, he was definitely safe for now. Now his absolute priority was to lay low and craft a brand new identity. Suddenly, his deep thoughts were shattered by a strange voice calling out. The voice asked if he was Roger Selishi, causing him to turn immediately. The elderly man claimed he recognized him from his brief conversation with the knight. The elderly gentleman offered a polite bow, introducing himself by the name of Wilfred. He worked at Theon Academy and rushed over upon hearing about the train incident. He wanted to greet the young professor, relieved to see he was completely unharmed. He then gestured toward his carriage, offering a direct ride straight to the academy. Naturally, Machevli hated this sudden complication, but his hands were completely tied. He had to maintain his perfect alibi and pretend to be Roger Selishi. Wilfred steered the wooden carriage, led forward by a massive mechanical horse. Inside, Machevli sat in complete silence, deeply lost in his own thoughts. He slowly realized that this entire situation was starting to look incredibly bad. It turned out the academy sent someone to personally collect the prestigious new professor. He is no ordinary person. Looking closely, it is clear this old man is in pretty great shape. Plus, our hero did not even notice him approaching. Based on that, maybe the guy was a trained knight. He realized that if he tried to flee right now using a flimsy excuse, it would look incredibly suspicious. The old man would definitely come after him. For now, it was probably best to put his escape plans on hold. Ever since Gerard was presumed dead, he had basically been living as a ghost in this country. This meant that if he suddenly vanished, nobody would ever even notice. Looking up, the young man realized this was actually a perfect opportunity. Having an ironclad alibi was fantastic, and as long as he kept it up, he could safely live as Roger Selici. Before long, their carriage came to a stop, and the elderly driver announced that they had finally reached their destination. Our protagonist looked around, realizing that this massive place was indeed the famous Theon. Its sheer scale was absolutely mind-blowing. Machiavelli could only wonder, did all of this really belong to the Academy? It was larger than he had ever imagined. Wilfried offered to escort him straight to Madame Rector, telling him he could leave his heavy luggage behind within just a few moments. The two of them were heading directly toward the Academy's grand main building. While his elderly guide waited out in the spacious hallway, our protagonist stepped confidently through the heavy doors. As soon as he entered, he introduced himself, stating clearly that his name was Roger Selici. He added that he had arrived specifically at the rector's request. The massive office was impressively large, with a modest desk situated at the far end where the rector sat. She listened closely to his introduction with a faint, polite smile, then looked up to welcome him, saying she had been eagerly expecting Sir Roger. She introduced herself as Elizabeth Willow, the official rector of the prestigious Theon Academy. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, beautifully lighting the massive space. She asked if he was completely unharmed after the terrifying train attack she heard about. Our hero assured her he was perfectly fine, thanks to the knights arriving just in the nick of time. The rector offered a warm, relieved smile, saying she was incredibly glad to hear that, since any harm to him would trouble them. Machiavelli was slightly taken aback. He wondered how she could speak so openly about the potential fallout for the Academy. It was quite a bold thing to admit, and it honestly did not make much sense to him, but a deeper concern was the bizarre, uneasy feeling that had washed over him the moment he stepped inside. It is easy to get paranoid here, but he genuinely had to wonder if Madame Rector had met the real Roger before. Could she expose him? The answer came immediately when the woman spoke up, noting that this was their very first time meeting face to face. She complimented him on his tall, handsome appearance. Relieved that his cover was safe, he politely thanked her for the generous compliment. The rector laughed it off, telling him not to be so humble. After all, she was absolutely certain he would be incredibly popular with the students. She then slid a document across the desk, asking him to review the terms of his employment. These were the details he had received earlier, listing his generous salary and a contract lasting for 2 years, along with fully covered meals and lodging at the Academy. Our hero carefully scanned the papers, taking. He figured it was just a contract, and it hardly mattered since he planned on running away soon anyway. But then he saw the salary, 30 imperial coins a month, which is actually a fortune. That translates to roughly 30 million dinars in government currency. Some would even value it at 300 million. Right then, Elizabeth asks about the contract, wanting to know if he found the generous terms acceptable. Machiavelli hides his shock and simply replies that the conditions are not bad at all. In his mind, he realized this is not just decent, it is actually an absolute jackpot. But he has to keep his cool. With a massive salary like this, the responsibilities at Theon Academy must be heavy. Our protagonist wonders if he can successfully hide his total lack of teaching experience. After all, every student here is basically a genius. Still, backing out now is out of the question. Everything is already set, and refusing abruptly would look incredibly suspicious. So for now, his only choice is to play along, bluff, and read the room. Luckily, reading people is his specialty. He calmly tells her that he is fully satisfied and ready to sign. Besides, with his unique knowledge from both his past and present lives, he can definitely pull this off. The rector smiles and offers a handshake, saying she is thrilled too. Welcome, Professor Roger, to the academy. Our guy plays along smoothly. Telling Mrs. Willow the feeling is mutual. Secretly, he calculates that he only needs to survive 2 years of this before he can finally be free. Soon night falls. McCavely sits on his couch, realizing he has 3 weeks before the semester begins. This should be more than enough time to prepare. Though he never expected they would give him a whole private mansion to himself. He lets out a heavy sigh, reflecting on the absurd turn of events. He is officially a professor now. Slowly, memories of his past life and how he arrived in this strange world 27 years ago flood his mind. He had been reborn with all his memories intact, but none of his old powers. With no family to rely on, he had to survive purely on his wits. It was a brutal journey, but he never imagined he would end up teaching. He laughs at the irony. Technically, he just stole a dead man's career. To be exact, he is forced to teach a subject he never wanted. But looking at the bright side, he desperately needed a fresh identity anyway. Stepping into Roger's shoes worked out perfectly. Roger was a minor noble from the tiny kingdom of Kyoden, an only child with no living parents. The letters McCavely discovered are written in a stiff, formal style. Proving Roger had no close friends, this means his cover is practically flawless. No one will ever guess who he really is under this perfect disguise. Now he just needs to plan his lectures and gather intel on the academy. Standing up, he decides that his absolute first order of business is to explore. But before he can even take a step, his stomach lets out a massive rumble. He suddenly realizes he has not eaten a single thing during this whole crazy ordeal. Deciding to postpone his prep work until tomorrow, he wonders where to find a decent restaurant. By the time morning rolls around, it is a beautiful, sunny day. McCavely sits at a local cafe, sipping a hot tea. While carefully reviewing his new teaching documents, as he reads, he realizes 2 weeks had flown by quite fast. Generally speaking, it was enough time for him to gather the necessary intel. He had also prepared well for his upcoming classes. And now he had one final week to put that brand new knowledge into practice. Guests were already starting to arrive at the academy, so he needed to head home and prepare for the water course. But then, a stranger sat right next to him, saying she was glad to see him safe. She had been worried that something terrible had happened. McCavely suddenly realized she was talking directly to him, and anxiety instantly crept in. They sat there, just the two of them, on a secluded terrace near the cafeteria, completely isolated. She leaned in and asked why he had been off the grid for 2 weeks, since the other members of their secret organization were getting worried. McCavely quietly sipped his drink, carefully calculating his next move. After a tense pause, he set his cup down, silently signaling he was ready to talk. Instantly, his companion shifted her posture and explained that she had to verify a few things. McCavely realized he was being watched. Or rather, to be completely precise about the situation, it was the identity of Roger Selici that was being tailed. She whispered that the sudden terrorist attack was completely unexpected. They had absolutely no clue that the rebels were planning to strike. McCavely listened quietly before demanding information about the academy. She looked confused, asking if they had not already sent those files. McCavely replied that he had to test her reliability first. The stranger nodded, satisfied with that answer, but he knew he was walking a thin line. He almost blew his cover right there. Talk about a heart-stopping moment. Now he had to play his part perfectly. He casually asked if they had handled everything. His companion smiled slightly and assured him that of course they did. Before meeting him, they had targeted the main academy figures and successfully tracked down and eliminated the traitor within their ranks. Rumor had it they forced the traitor to eat his own limbs before throwing the rest to the dogs. She asked if that was not a fitting end. That brutal threat sends a chill straight down his spine. Things are looking bad. He needed to keep his composure at all costs. Reaching down, he took a slow sip of his drink. Suddenly, the girl jerked around abruptly. As though sensing a sudden danger nearby, she quickly lowered her head. Apologizing in a hushed whisper, she stammered about how she should have personally verified the information before reporting back to him. Machiavelli had no clue what she was referring to, but calmly told her it did not matter, asking the real reason for her sudden arrival here. She replied that he had already been stationed here for a full month. Without a single check-in from the agency, the young man cut her off, asking if she simply decided to take charge. Frightened, she stammered an apology. He instantly ordered her to shut her mouth. Slamming down his cup, he warned her that this reckless stunt drew far too much attention. It was highly irritating. Did she actually want to get caught? Machiavelli watched her reaction. Words very closely, and in that moment, he knew for sure she was completely terrified of Roger. Her hands and her entire body were visibly shaking right now. Soon, our hero acknowledged her state. He listened closely to her report, wondering just how many agents they had actually taken. Had deployed, she replied that 31 operatives from the Third Order, along with 7 from the Second Order, had already successfully managed to slip right inside the academy, plus the remaining members of the First Order had already fully taken up their key positions according to the master plan. Machiavelli noted that everything was proceeding exactly as it should. Once their primary mission is completely wrapped up, they will quickly disperse. The girl readily agreed to this, adding that next time they should meet at their prearranged location. Machiavelli cut her off, asking in a harsh, cold tone if she was daring to tell him what to do. He turned back toward his private locker, demanding to know how she dared to order him around. Later, he returned straight back to his quarters and began to sift through the records on Roger, a high-ranking noble with absolutely no living family. Shockingly, he was also the youngest fourth-rank mage and a highly respected, very prominent professor at the prestigious Theon's academy. This whole setup was incredibly messy, and our hero had to wonder, why on earth hadn't he noticed any of these red flags sooner? Up until now, Roger's constructed personality had seemed absolutely, flawlessly perfect to him. Carefully crafted to avoid triggering any alarms. Without such meticulous planning, he would simply never have slipped past the academy defenses. Meanwhile, the secret letters that Machiavelli uncovered were heavily encrypted. At this exact point, he felt incredibly desperate. Completely stuck with no idea what to do next. Talk about an absolute nightmare scenario. He collapsed onto the bed, staring blankly at the chandelier hanging above him. Lost in thought, he admitted to himself that he had severely miscalculated, unable to fully believe he had gotten himself into such a mess with his incredibly hasty, careless actions. Determined to find a way out of this, he got up to search through his books and secret archives. Our hero suddenly realized that Roger had used Kyoden to encode his messages. The sentence construction immediately caught his attention, though hadn't thought much of it at first. He was the main spy, sent to infiltrate the academy, gain everyone's absolute trust, and then periodically report back on their progress. But that was not the only thing bothering him right now. But that wasn't the only mystery weighing heavily on his mind. He once again plunged deep, fell deep into thought. The more he analyzed the pieces, the less sense it all made. How could the leader of a massive secret society die in a simple attack? After all, the man was supposedly one of their strongest members, responsible for positioning spies inside the academy itself. A powerhouse of that caliber should have easily and definitely survived. Instead of dwelling on it, Machiavelli sighed, knowing there was absolutely no point in complaining about a dead man now. still, our hero had to deal with the complex tension mounting between Theon's academy and this mysterious secret organization. Pondering the situation, he realized it might actually be a massive blessing in disguise for him. That they chose to contact him, after all, judging by everything she had revealed, this secret society is divided into four very distinct, powerful tiers indeed. Specifically the 0, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd orders, and while our hero knows nothing about the elusive 0 order, simply knowing they exist is already a massive, unbelievable advantage for him. Now McCavely decided he absolutely had to uncover what other messages had been sent. McCavely needs answers. He must uncover what else is being sent here. If a member of the First Order actually knew the real Roger, the risk is massive. He would be exposed as a fake. For now, the most important thing is simply avoiding detection. His best play is to use Theon Academy's influence to wipe out those secret orders. But a dangerous cult stands zero chance against a legendary academy. They cannot win, but first, he needs to secure the crucial information without raising any suspicion. He must gather the key intel without either side suspecting what he is up to. But honestly, playing this dangerous double game is already giving him a massive, pounding headache. Stress is building up. McCavely sees 2 incredibly difficult years of teaching ahead of him. The next morning arrives, and just like that, the new semester is officially starting. Noisy, excited students are already completely packing the academy's grand, echoing stone corridors. Inside the grand lecture hall, students take their seats, waiting eagerly for their next class. Amidst the loud chatter, one student leans over to ask his friends a major question. He asks them if they have already heard the massive news going around the campus. And get this, word is a brand, new professor is taking over their classes. He will be teaching spell theory and elemental manifestation to the sophomore class. Another student asks how a rookie teacher could possibly handle second-year magical studies. If he got hired, he must be a real master of the mystic arts. But the truth is, the academy had no choice because the old professor suddenly resigned. To be fair, a student totally humiliated him in front of the entire class. She basically proved she was way more skilled than the actual teacher. Hearing the gossip, a nearby classmate nudges Flora, teasing that they are talking about her. Flora just sighs. Did she really do anything wrong besides pointing out his flaws? She simply showed the old professor that his magical theories were totally outdated. Her friend laughs and agrees, but warns her that this new professor is different. Apparently, this guy has an elite military background and a flawless, legendary reputation. Word is he is a highly decorated combat officer and a true genius. Another student chimed in, asking if they knew about the professor's family history. Rumor has it he is actually a fallen nobleman, which immediately excites the crowd. If that is true, they won't have to stress about strict grades or harsh rules. Flora quietly rolls her eyes, thinking her classmates are incredibly naive. Right then, the heavy double doors swing open, and trust me, everyone instantly freezes. The undercover protagonist walks in, stepping calmly up toward the center podium. McCavely reaches the desk, tapping his hand to get their attention. Every single eye in the room immediately locks onto his commanding presence. He looks out at the quiet crowd, introducing himself as their new professor. He claims his name is Roger Celli, offering them a standard, polite welcome. The atmosphere in the lecture hall instantly turns dead silent, nobody daring to move. Every student hangs on his words as the mysterious new professor goes on to explain his plans. He mentions that since their class schedule isn't fully finalized, they will start with some basics. But do not expect a typical magic lesson. He is completely shaking up the curriculum. The core spells remain the same, but his entire teaching style is completely brand new. He warns them that they will not just study boring magic theory in his class. They will do intense practical training. Furthermore, this class is not just for sophomores. First-year rookies are also fully invited to attend, which instantly sparks massive chaos. Shocked whispers erupt across the entire room as the students start to panic. Machiavelli overhears their whispers and immediately demands silence, noticing their obvious irritation. They are clearly miserable with this setup, dreading the massive workload heading their way. Then a student raises a hand, asking why the academy decided to merge the classes. The question comes from a young girl, staring up at her new teacher in absolute surprise. The young professor locks eyes with her, a sudden flash of recognition hitting him. He is certain he has seen her somewhere before, but keeps his cool and answers. Machiavelli explains that his duty is to ensure every single student takes away something valuable. No matter their skill level, they should not expect basic lessons. Still confused, the girl speaks up again, asking him to explain his methods further. But the mysterious professor simply smiles, saying that revealing all his secrets would be boring. He wants to keep them curious, promising they will find out in the next class. Before dismissing them, there is one final, crucial thing he wants to make clear. Think you can get easy grades without any stress? Think again. He is more than happy to crush those lazy expectations right here and now. Honestly, if they cannot handle the heat, they should just skip his lectures entirely. Deep down, he figures having fewer students would actually make his job much easier. Even though he prepared thoroughly, managing a smaller group saves him plenty of effort. Besides, the proud sophomores would hate sitting in a classroom full of brand new freshmen. Sharing a lecture hall with beginners is bound to bruise their massive ego. Why would anyone choose a difficult class anyway? So he wraps up his speech. With that, he asks the quiet room if anyone has any final questions. The students feel his overwhelming, intense pressure, assuming it stems from military experience. Whispers circulate about him, being the absolute youngest fourth-rank mage in existence. They wonder if the rumors are true, yet they have too many questions. This particular girl knows she does not have the guts to speak up now. Meanwhile, the talented Flora finds herself completely fascinated by this mysterious new professor. After a brief, heavy silence, Machiavelli officially declares the start of the semester. With the class finished, the young professor packs up and walks out of the hall. Strolling through the quiet academy corridors, he reflects on the lack of student questions. Absolutely silent, not a single student wants to clarify anything. You would think someone would want to dig into his actual background. Honestly, this quiet treatment works out even better for keeping his cover intact. All those carefully prepared fake answers are completely useless now, he realizes. Walking further, Machiavelli wonders if they were intentionally staying completely silent. Perhaps he should have acted a bit warmer to make them feel comfortable. He might have bruised their pride, but his thoughts are suddenly cut short. Looking up, he spots several students from his class waiting in the hallway. They stand quietly against the wall, looking incredibly nervous and uncertain of themselves. More and more students join them, forming quite a massive crowd outside. They line up neatly on both sides of the hallway, forming a human path. Wait, is this actually happening? Machiavelli is completely stunned by this bizarre setup. Just as he begins to wonder, a woman suddenly approaches him. She politely greets the young professor and apologizes for the sudden interruption. She asks if he is indeed the new instructor, Sir Roger. The protagonist looks at her closely as she introduces herself as Selena. He welcomes her warmly, realizing she is also starting her very first day at the academy. The guy senses the mutual spark and wonders if she has a question for him. She nods with a soft smile, stepping close enough to whisper her thoughts. Asking if Machiavelli has eaten lunch yet, a crowd of teachers suddenly interrupts. One of the men steps forward, introducing himself as Brian, the golem summoning instructor. Beside him stands a woman named Matilda, who introduces herself with a polite nod. She specializes in dispel magic, handling complex curses and mental hallucinations. He gladly returns the greeting, politely introducing himself to the group as Roger Selassie. Spell theory and practice, that is his official assignment here. He quietly wonders if this gathering is just a standard welcome for new academy professors. Or is there actually a deeper reason behind this sudden meet and greet? Matilda teases that he looks even more handsome up close, earning a polite thank you. Then his focus shifts to a lone man standing off in the distance. Their eyes lock. McHavely sends him a cold glare of pure distrust. The stranger notices the intense stare and quickly looks away to avoid confrontation. Matilda lines in close, whispering the noble's identity. He was the first to join their ranks, and he carries himself like a proud nobleman. While the others are commoners, Roger Selassie simply nods to show he understands the hierarchy. He watches silently. His mind analyzes the lineup of the latest recruits. One highborn noble and 3 commoners of humble origins make up the group. Yet regardless of social class, they are each absolute masters of their respective crafts. Something is off. There is a high probability of a hidden agenda here. Think about it, any one of these professors could be a hidden enemy. Just because Chris joined the academy first does not make him innocent. Trust is a luxury. He cannot afford to rely on anyone here. Suddenly, Chris sighs loudly and announces he can no longer stand being around them. He claims he only came out of curiosity to inspect the new arrivals. But all he sees is a bunch of commoners and a fallen noble. He makes it absolutely clear that he will never associate with people of lower class. Then he turns his arrogant gaze directly toward McHavely with a smug look. He warns him not to act like some sort of big shot here. Silence, McHavely offers him nothing but a cold, unbothered stare. Matilda snaps back instantly, declaring that high status does not justify looking down on others. She turns to Roger Selassie and gently advises him to ignore the arrogant noble. He agrees, suggesting they leave Chris to wallow in his own self-importance. The others readily agree. They are happy to leave the snob behind. As the group heads off, McHavely wonders if this newfound company is actually a blessing. But personal matters must wait, as his very first academy lecture is about to begin. Night falls. Inside a dimly lit student dormitory, a strange communication device hums to life. It is a secret communication tool used to coordinate with other students. A message flashes on screen, asking if anyone has heard of their new professor. The chatter reveals he is the youngest 4th-rank mage to serve as a military officer. Rumor has it he was even heavily involved in the dangerous cryptid hunt. Furthermore, the Magic Tower officially classifies him as an elite independent specialist. When it came to magic, one girl wondered if that was really true, looking thoughtful. She kept typing, determined to never let her esteemed superior's very first class be a failure. To keep things running smoothly, she was going to ensure that the lecture hall was absolutely packed. Sending out a mass invite on the network, a curious student asked if freshmen could attend. The sudden offer immediately sparked a wave of curiosity and gossip among the academy students. Some posted that the class sounded incredibly tempting, urging others to sign up right away. Thanks to the viral post, a huge crowd decided to check it out. Soon enough, Ludger Cherish took a steady, relaxed stroll toward the lecture hall. He walked with calm steps, mentally preparing for his debut lecture. Today marked his official first class, and he wondered how many actually dared to show up. After all, he had purposefully set some rather harsh expectations beforehand. He had openly warned everyone that his magical curriculum would be brutally difficult. With a warning like that, most sensible students would usually run the other way. If anyone did show up, it would probably just be the leftover stragglers with no options. That is how the academy works. Students choose their own classes and schedules. Ludger estimated that in the absolute best-case scenario, he might get 30 students. 30 was his maximum expectation. Meanwhile, groups of students outside were whispering excitedly. They kept asking if everyone had seen the latest viral post about the new professor. Unaware of the online storm, Ludger stepped inside the massive auditorium. Honestly, the last thing he expected was to see a completely packed room. He looked around, genuinely stunned by the massive crowd of eager faces waiting. Given his intimidating reputation, he could not fathom why all 80 seats were fully occupied. What made even less sense was the sheer number of brand-new freshmen. The moment he stepped up, the entire room grew dead silent from his sheer presence. Ludger stared at the massive crowd, wondering if they simply lacked fear. Attending a difficult lecture with older, stronger seniors should have terrified these rookies. He walked up to the board, rubbing his temples while suspecting a massive trap. But he quickly shook the thought, realizing he had simply underestimated these kids. This academy only gathered the absolute cream of the crop from across the continent. These elite students had immense pride, and his harsh warning had likely triggered their competitive drive. Naturally, this entire overfilled situation was something he absolutely despised. But looking at the crowded hall, he knew there was no going back now. Steeling himself, he opened the class, noting the many new faces in attendance. He began his formal introduction, announcing his name as Professor Ludger Cherish. His promise was to teach them everything they needed to know about the magical arts. Right then, a bold student raised his hand, asking a highly skeptical question. Did the professor truly mean he could teach all 4 distinct paths of magic? Ludger slowly locked eyes with the outspoken boy, offering a cold, calculating stare. He coldly pointed out that he had not yet opened the floor for questions. From this day on, anyone who dared to disrupt his class would lose points. Reclaiming those lost points would be brutal, so they had better stay sharp. However, since the question was already out there, he decided to answer it. To their absolute shock, it turned out the boy's assumption was completely correct. The new professor intended to personally teach every single magic discipline. We are talking about liberation, elemental magic, telekinesis, and body strengthening, leaving Flora Lumos completely stunned. Normally, she only teaches 2 classes at most, but it turns out this new professor has managed to take on 4. To her, he is setting the bar way too high. Sir Roger was told he needed to show something today that would stir up real interest, so he grabs a pointer and aims it at the board, casting magic. He explains that this is a Tier 3 fire spell called Shivering Flame, built on a release base functioning through heat, ignition, compression, expansion, dispersion, and acceleration, making it a synergy of 7 distinct components. This method is 3 times faster than any standard way to cast it. Suddenly, the students start whispering, wondering if he can actually speed up the casting process, though a few openly doubt if it is even possible since the whole thing sounds completely unrealistic. Her friend asks Flora if she honestly believes the new professor, but Flora can only admit that she is highly doubtful, especially since Roger seems to have changed the spell's basic structure. Usually, you would rely on formula storage or memory reverberation to speed up casting, but both of those methods have strict limits. Flora quietly notes that there is a chance he is using one of those tricks, but if that is true, she will be deeply disappointed. In the young professor, meanwhile, Roger continues demonstrating his magic, remarking that since they must have questions, he will gladly take a few. A student named Alex, a quiet sophomore, raises his hand to speak. He asks how this method can possibly run 3 times faster than standard magic. Roger answers that it simply cuts out unnecessary steps to speed things up. Before calling for the next question, then a freshman named Dahlia asks if that means he altered the actual structure of the spell. Roger replies no, warning that rewriting a technique entirely makes it a completely different spell. Instead, he will show them how to accelerate their casting process while keeping the original magic pristine. Flora instantly raises her hand, boldly telling the professor that what he is suggesting is absolutely impossible. Roger hears her loud and clear, quietly staring back without a word. He studies the sophomore girl, remembering her introduction as Flora Loomis. The entire classroom immediately shifts focus, all eyes locking onto her. They do not know who she is, but they appreciate her speaking up. Now the professor must tread carefully. After a tense silence, McCavely speaks up, stating that while he only permitted questions, he will still make an exception. He asks her why she is so certain it is impossible. Flora replies that, to accelerate casting without altering the core formula, a mage needs decades of relentless, lifelong practice to reach master level. So, is he seriously claiming to be capable of something that even the greatest genius cannot hope to achieve? For that reason alone, she absolutely refuses to believe him. Roger stands silent for a second before suggesting that perhaps geniuses just never tried. Confused, Flora asks what he means by that. Sir Roger explains that modern magic stopped evolving because everyone got too focused on history and tradition, while science kept marching forward. That is the exact reason why technology now threatens to leave magic behind. He is not claiming science is inherently superior, but simply pointing out that their magic still has room to grow. Silence. No one dared to argue, but if nobody had tried to improve the magic, he would be the first. Flora stared, completely taken aback by his words. She couldn't believe his sheer audacity. What was he playing at? Was he really so shameless? Roger calmly spoke up, cutting through the silence. He explained, words alone wouldn't do it justice. He wanted to demonstrate. He then added, if he remembered correctly, her name was Flora, right? Did she know the average time it took to cast a flickering flame? She replied, it depended on rank, maybe 10 seconds for a novice, though she added that a higher-ranked wizard could easily cast it in 5. Roger nodded, but he noted that casting speed shouldn't just be about rank. If he adjusted the spell to fit the average student in this classroom, it would take 5 seconds at most, and he could do it much faster. The professor smiled, noting that her impressive level of confidence was certainly something. He challenged her, step up and show everyone an example. Flora stood up immediately, accepting his challenge without a single shred of hesitation. She walked up, raised her wand. She prepared to cast. A bright magical flame instantly began to materialize right before their eyes. In just a few moments, the entire spell stood fully complete before her. The watching students whispered. They were amazed at how fast she had done it. Talk about a classic flex from the prestigious Lumi's family daughter. Roger looked down at his stopwatch, 4 seconds and 78 milliseconds. At this moment, it was hard to believe she was only a second-year student. This was truly a flawless display of magic. Flora turned to him, claiming it was nothing special, but the professor cut her off, stating with a straight face that she was still too slow. Roger noted that the record for a third-rank mage is 4 seconds and 41 milliseconds, meaning her current speed was still lagging. Flora protested that she would get faster with practice, but Roger remained entirely unimpressed. The students whispered in disbelief. Was the teacher actually being serious? They murmured how fast was fast enough. Roger then gripped his own wand and told the class to watch closely as he cast the spell. He flicked his hand, magic unleashed. Flora watched, completely baffled. The technique he was using looked entirely different from anything she knew. Yet within a fraction of a second, her own spell was perfectly replicated. The moment Flora realized what had happened, she was left utterly speechless. Silence. The rest of the class watched the floating flame in absolute awe. None of them could tear their eyes away from the impossible sight. One student even leaped up from his desk, demanding to know how this was possible. The professor had cast it in under a single second, maybe even less. Flora stared in shock. This wasn't just a standard flame bolt. He had completely restructured the entire magic formula right before her eyes. Quiet fell. The professor asked if everyone had managed to follow. He offered to repeat the process for anyone who had missed it. Extending his hand once more, he casually gathered his mana to cast again. Instantly, the perfect flickering flame manifested once more. The students could only watch. Speechless, anyone standing close by was left completely dumbfounded. the results were too accurate. They changed their minds. Sir Roger calmly watched their sudden shift. He focused entirely on his stopwatch. He quietly read out the final time. 0.24 seconds. That was all it took to summon the flame. Honestly, that speed is absolute madness. Plus, the spell itself seemed highly unusual. He used a completely different technique earlier, but it still worked. Essentially, he used one established system to seamlessly construct a brand new program. Confused students whispered, "How could anyone craft a technique out of another technique?" The professor explained, "You simply modify the initial inputs for a known result." This unique process essentially turns the physical body into a highly efficient piece of hardware. The massive accumulation of magical data then automatically activates the spell program. It is like running a modern application. He calls this the source code. Flora was stunned by this. She had never heard of such magic. What is this source code? Who is this mysterious man anyway? The young instructor turned back to her, asking if her doubts were finally cleared. She hated to admit it. Still, she managed a quiet nod. She apologized to Sir Roger. She had rudely interrupted the flow of class. This was all because she had judged his revolutionary methods way too quickly without thinking. He asked if she agreed now. The girl looked down, thoroughly defeated. She quietly agreed. The professor, however, was not quite finished with her. He pointed out that her behavior towards him had been incredibly rude. Such blatant disrespect in front of the class deserved a proper consequence. Therefore, he announced a sudden 10-point penalty for Flora Lumos. The classroom erupted into shocked whispers. No one could believe the harsh punishment. They wondered how she could be penalized on her very first day. The other girls in the class were absolutely furious, quietly arguing about the decision. But she could do nothing. She slowly headed back to her desk. Suddenly, the professor called out to her. He was not done yet. He noted that her execution of the flame magic was absolutely flawless. Because of her perfect demonstration, he decided to immediately return those 10 points to her. He deeply respected diligent students. Flora had done a fantastic job. She clenched her fists in absolute frustration, barely squeezing out a quiet thank you. And just like that, the classroom starts whispering again, "Check this out." The penalty was canceled. The students were incredibly relieved for her. Flora returned to her seat. Her close friend immediately asked how she felt. Flora sat down and muttered that everything was fine, thanking her friend. Shirley smiled warmly. She was genuinely glad her friend was all right. She wondered how Flora let it go so easily, but that was just her style. Shirley completely stopped worrying, confident that the heavy drama had finally passed. But Flora could not let the situation go. The bizarre mystery consumed her thoughts. The strange encounter lingered heavily. Meanwhile, Sir Roger slowly removed his outer coat. He announced that the brief introduction was over. Now, the real class would begin. He promised to choose one attentive student to learn this source code. They would have to work incredibly hard to earn this honor. The students stared back, their expressions instantly shifting to intense focus. He immediately grows wary. Soon, the class resumes. The professor lays out critical magic knowledge, high up in the back row. A student overhears others whispering stupid and mocking comments about the instructor. For a moment, he actually feared his entire journey here was for nothing. But watching the lesson unfold now, he realizes he was completely wrong. Finally, it makes sense why Theon holds the crown as the strongest magic academy. A sharp chime suddenly echoes through the hall, signaling class is over. The professor packs up, telling them to review the source codes at home. Up top, the boy with glasses sits in absolute awe. He is completely blown away. He still cannot believe he just witnessed such a beautiful spell structure. But his quiet muttering catches the attention of a nearby noble student. The snob sneers, asking if that garbage seriously impressed him. Looking down, he scoffs that it only proves how shallow commoners are. This is exactly why lowborn trash do not belong here. The boy in glasses keeps his mouth shut, staying silent. The noble looks around, realizing they are completely alone in this section. Startled, the boy asks if he was talking to him and stammers an apology. The noble snaps, demanding to know if he is mocking him. Shaking, the boy quickly insists he would never, but the noble is furious. He yells, asking how a peasant dares to look down on Baron Filio's eldest son. As the boy pleads, another voice suddenly cuts in from the shadows. "Wait, Baron Filio, isn't that some tiny estate on the Empire's dusty border?" The arrogant noble whips around, sneering to ask if Theon is recruiting beggars now. The newcomer retorts that even beggars are better than the brainless sons of minor houses. That insult absolutely sets the noble off. His face twists in pure rage. Snapping, he draws his wand, channeling magic right there in the lecture hall. He calls them insolent scoundrels, screaming about how they dare insult nobility. They are going to pay for their disrespect with their blood, right here and now. But the newcomer doesn't even flinch. He locks eyes with him, daring him to try. The Baron's son hesitates, asking what he means. The stranger steps down. He slowly walks down, repeating his dare. "Go ahead, make a move and let's see. Let's find out what happens to an idiot who attacks classmates inside the academy." Surely he doesn't think his family status will save him from expulsion. Did he seriously fail to read the school rules before showing up on campus? Before throwing another fit, he really needs to take a good look around this room. They already have quite an audience. The noble quickly glances around. Sure enough, several students are staring and whispering, watching the drama unfold. Realizing he has lost his advantage, he angrily tells the stranger to watch his back. With that final threat, the noble storms off. The boy with glasses finally breathes. Turning to the brave student who stepped in, he deeply thanks him for his help. Introducing himself, he says his name is Adrian. The savior responds in kind. He says his name is Leo, but tells him not to bother with the gratitude. He only stepped in because he hates arrogant nobles who brag about their bloodlines. Adrian smiles, calling him a genuinely good person, which only seems to annoy the savior. Leo sighs, muttering that he clearly wasn't listening, before turning around to leave. After that, the bespectacled student mentioned that he was leaving with him. And Leo replied that he did not even know his own destination yet. After all, the student wondered if that was a chemistry textbook he was currently holding. Especially since they were both heading to an alchemy class together. Leo paid close attention, telling him to just do what he does best, but added that he should not act so obvious. Adrian asked in complete surprise what he meant by that. Leo bluntly replied that he was acting like a total commoner. No proper magic training. Adrian asked if it was really truly that obvious since he had no idea. Leo explained that he still needed to understand how things were structured at Theon Academy, especially among the sophomores, since quite a few held massive sway in high society. Take Flora Loomis, for example, a prominent sophomore they needed to watch out for. Adrian asked if he meant the high-profile girl who spoke up in class earlier. Leo confirmed it, warning him that rumor had it she was absolutely no walk in the park. In fact, it was best to keep a safe distance. The former professor of magic theory was recently dismissed, and it all happened because of that single noble girl. Next, he needed to watch out for a highly influential member of the royal bloodline from the Elysian Empire, the third princess, Adriana Vanxillian, for simple commoners like them. It would end terribly if they ever crossed a royal figure. Adrian nodded in agreement, suddenly realizing exactly who his friend was referring to. After all, he had spotted the royal princess during a lecture just a short while ago. Leo then mentioned a third-year student who leads a highly influential noble faction. He was talking about the powerful heir of the great house, Jonathan Valberg. Adrian gasped, asking if that was from one of the 3 legendary ducal families. Leo confirmed that to someone of his stature, commoners were nothing more than mere insects. Just stay away, far away, that was the safest play here. Thankfully, that dangerous noble did not seem to attend any of their alchemy classes. Yet somehow Adrian had already managed to cross him. Adrian sighed, feeling utterly helpless. Was there anyone else to avoid? Leo muttered that he was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. While there were other targets, these were the primary ones he wanted to warn him about. Adrian thanked him warmly, then asked if he would like to grab some lunch together. Leo stared back in complete disbelief, wondering why this guy was acting so friendly. Meanwhile, Professor McHavely walked through the quiet corridors of the academy, lost in deep thought. He was reviewing everything that had just happened. His very first lecture. Honestly, the student reaction was better than he had ever hoped. Even so, he really had not expected this kind of reaction. The current development level of this world roughly resembled the 19th century on Earth. So despite the existence of powerful magic, scientific advancement remained highly limited. But coming from the 21st century, his modern scientific knowledge was vastly superior. By using this edge, he had successfully developed his brand new magic source code. It seamlessly blended scientific principles with magic, though he had not expected such a shock. When his master saw it, he simply said it was decent. Since his mentor was always so brief, our hero had expected a similar student reaction. Spellcasting should be fast, accurate, but right now it is just too complex. And worst of all, magic in this world remains limited to the third tier. Machavely can't just teach raw source code, he needs other spells ready to keep secrets. Walking up to the office, he notices a sign hanging right beside the door. He stands there, wondering if this grand space is actually meant for him. Gathering his courage to find out, he grabs the handle and pulls the door open. Inside, the rector of the academy is standing right in front of the window. Her attention locks onto him the absolute moment he steps inside. With a warm smile, she welcomes him as Professor Roger. The woman asks how he likes his beautiful new office. Honestly, he is quite confused by her presence, but they quickly settle into a conversation. She explains that every single professor in the academy gets a private workspace. He's free to use this room however he sees fit, of course. Machavely nods, but the suspicious rector quickly stops him. She asks if she's not allowed in here, and he quickly responds. He tells her he was simply curious about the real reason behind her visit. Honestly, her sudden arrival caught him completely off guard, which she finds amusing. She says she just wanted to drop by and check on their dear new professor. Since she runs the place, she has to keep a close eye on everyone. With those words, she shoots him a sharp look. Machavely slowly lowers his eyes. No joke, this woman is highly intimidating. Meeting her gaze directly sends shivers down his spine. The rector notes how quiet and composed he is, expecting more of a reaction. He apologizes, calmly telling her that his quota for surprises is already full. Secretly, he thinks running into an actual ghost at night would be less shocking. He still has absolutely no idea what she is actually doing in his office. She mentions that her sudden visits usually startle the other professors, too. In fact, Roger is the very last person on her list tonight. Machavely wonders if she really visited everyone, or if that is just an excuse. And if she did visit the others, why did she leave him for last? There is a pretty high chance that she already knows something about him. Even if his secret group hides well, she is still the academy chancellor. Any suspicious details would easily catch her attention, no doubt about it. Now wait, is she actually on to him? He definitely worries about her suspicions. Sure, he leads a hidden group, but he is not working against her. Breaking the silence, the rector mentions hearing about him, inviting freshmen to class. Machavely confirms this, explaining that he does not restrict his lectures by year. She quickly reassures him that she is not criticizing his unique teaching methods. In fact, she quite approves of how he handles the freshman class. Some of these new students are incredibly strong, possessing very rare magic. He acts surprised, smoothly playing along since he only just received the student roster. Either way, she warns him that the imperial princess is attending his lectures. He needs to avoid trouble. While she doesn't demand special treatment, things could get messy. If anything goes wrong, dealing with the aftermath will be an absolute nightmare. She places her full trust in Professor Roger. Machevely secretly wonders about the princess. The rector then warmly congratulates him on the massive success of his first class. Hearing the students left highly positive reviews, Roger politely offers her some hot tea. The rector simply smiles back. She offered him a sweet smile, thanking him for his incredible hospitality during her wait. Then she wished him a productive day and casually strolled out of the office. The door clicked shut behind her. Right outside, another professor was already waiting. He immediately asked how their conversation went, eager to know the results. Could Roger really be trusted? Honestly, Elizabeth admitted she had no idea. She usually keeps a very close eye on anyone who seems even slightly suspicious. But she could not say that about Roger at all. Willow seemed rather surprised. He found that hard to believe, but knew the Lady Rector would solve it. Elizabeth just smiled at his words, quietly hoping that would be the case. She quietly agreed, though she was still puzzled why this man had not even flinched. He had faced her legendary, enchanting gaze several times now without breaking a sweat. She knew that if he was a fourth-ranked mage, he would have folded. Yet the professor had absolutely no reaction, which was incredibly strange to her. This could only mean one thing: he resisted her charm through sheer willpower alone. If that was true, then he was a far more interesting man than she expected. And let us not forget that terrifying train attack that started all of this. Knowing Theon Academy is run by a shadowy, secret group, she must stay alert. She had to pay close attention to every tiny detail. What if this was all a setup? What if that incident was a distraction for an imposter to steal the real Roger's identity? Stepping out of her thoughts, she turned to Wilford to ask for his opinion. She wanted to know what the old man honestly made of this entire situation. The old man simply smiled, admitting he did not know, but felt the youth was unusual. His old gut was practically screaming that this kid was someone very special. Elizabeth noted his gut never lied, though she was still hesitant to trust Roger completely. She decided she would keep a very close eye on him for a while longer. Meanwhile, our protagonist sat alone in his office, slowly recovering from her intense gaze. He sighed, desperately wishing he could avoid these stressful personal meetings in the future. She was clearly interrogating him back there, trying to dig up his secrets. Still, if he really thought about it, none of that actually mattered right now. He had not done anything wrong, so he would just keep laying low as usual. Now watch, McHavely is about to spot a massive surprise on this list. A highly familiar name caught his eye, and he paused to consider the implications. The Lumos family was, without a doubt, the most influential noble house around. He suddenly wondered if their recent clash would drag him into unnecessary trouble. After pondering for a moment, he figured he needed to make a move. Hopefully, Flora had not taken his harsh words too personally during their talk. After all, he did award her extra points as a peace offering between them. He recalled the rector mentioning that this year's batch of freshmen was incredibly elite. One particular freshman standout was even personally backed by the powerful magic tower. Not to mention, the lineup even included the princess of the great alien empire. Finally locating the student, he stared closely at the profile on his desk. He wondered if this odd magic practitioner was indeed who the rector meant. An instant wave of recognition hit him. He had definitely seen this face before. Still, he decided not to overthink it, since the memory would likely return later. With a shrug, he continued flipping through the remaining student lists on file. Looking over the full student list, he realized he had to remain on guard. Especially since Elizabeth was still glaring at him with pure suspicion in her eyes. He even wondered if staying with the secret society might actually be safer. After all, that mysterious girl had explicitly recognized him as a First Order member. She had surely seen Roger boarding the train, making his disguise no surprise. It meant she expected the shift in look, but if the real Roger was a master spy, then he would have to pull off the same level of infiltration. Still, he shook his head, knowing how easily this gamble could turn fatal. If his cover gets blown, there is no guarantee the organization will protect him. If things go south, he is completely on his own. For now, he must keep acting as a normal professor and handle his classes. A sudden, loud knock on his door instantly snaps him back to reality. He walks over to open it, wondering who could possibly be visiting at this hour. A staff member greets Roger, handing over a document. Machiavelli looks it over. He asks, "Is this the night patrol schedule?" The man confirms it and warns him that his shift starts tonight. Roger recalls that this duty was indeed part of his contract. With his task now finished, the messenger quickly takes his leave and departs. The professor figures the patrol should be simple. But just wait, night shifts at this academy are never that quiet. Over at the training hall, students are busy practicing their spell control. They cast spells at dummies until an arrogant noble girl suddenly snaps. She demands the commoner repeat her words, but the girl stands firm. She argues she has every right to train in this public hall. If the noble elites do not like it, they can leave instead. She freezes. How dare a filthy commoner show such insolence? She asks how a mere commoner dares speak so rudely. The commoner points out that everyone is equal here at the academy. The noble girl just laughs, smiling at her pathetic ignorance. She says those rules are just lies to comfort lowborn trash so they do not feel left out. A boy nearby chimed in, calling the commoners stupid bugs trying to crawl higher. Hearing their cruel insults, the quiet girl chooses not to reply. She realizes that trying to reason with them is completely pointless. The noble stops her, demanding she beg for forgiveness right now. But the commoner simply turns away. It is pure defiance. Watching students whisper about the girl walking away from Lady Denema. They wonder why this commoner is being so stubbornly defiant right now. The highborn Lady Denema fumes. No one dares to ignore her. Furious, her hand clamps tightly around her magic wand. She calls the commoner a filthy mutt who needs to be taught her place. Believing she can easily crush her, she unleashes her magic in rage. A bright spell erupts, heading straight for the retreating girl. Shocked onlookers cry out, unable to believe she actually attacked. Hearing the sudden panic and yelling behind her, the commoner quickly spins around. Her eyes widen as she spots the lethal spell flying right at her. With the attack closing in fast, she knew there was no time to dodge. She screamed in terror, but a second later, another spell collided with it. Both attacks canceled each other out and vanished completely. Shocked that her strike was blocked, the arrogant noblewoman absolutely lost her temper. She furiously demanded to know who it was that dared to interfere with her fight. Looking down from the balcony, Roger coldly pointed out their complete lack of discipline. Are they seriously attempting to have a real deathmatch here? Honestly, what was happening in front of him could barely even be called a fight. The semester had barely started, and they were already causing a scene. It was incredibly disrespectful to Theon. The target wondered if that was Professor Roger. Floating down with his magic, he explained he originally planned on giving a simple warning. But this was clearly a dangerous, one-sided execution. Hearing this, the noblewoman scoffed. She demanded to know what the issue was, claiming she was defending her family honor. But Roger merely questioned what kind of honor she was talking about. Inside the gates of Theon Academy, every single student was absolutely equal. Her prestigious bloodline meant absolutely nothing here, and he refused to overlook her behavior. With that, Roger turned on his heel and ordered her to follow him immediately. Hearing him order her around like a commoner made her blood boil with rage. Staring at his retreating back with sheer fury, she spat out a venomous insult. She screamed that he was nothing but a lowly, fallen nobleman, but almost instantly, Talk about a massive mistake. She instantly realized she had crossed a line. But it was too late. Her allies stood completely horrified. They stared in shock at her behavior. Even her target stood stunned. Silence for a few agonizing seconds. Roger stood perfectly still. He quietly processed the sheer disrespect that had just echoed through the hall. Then he slowly turned back to face her with an ice-cold stare. He quietly asked what she had just said, his piercing stare locking onto her. She felt a heavy, suffocating wave of pure power radiating from him. Getting no response from the frozen girl, he commanded her to speak up. The young noblewoman and the surrounding crowd were absolutely paralyzed with fear. Her throat tightened, and she could not squeeze out a single syllable. She lowered her head in terror, knowing any excuse would only make it worse. As he stepped right up to her, his shadow completely loomed over her. He calmly asked if she had indeed called him a lowly fallen nobleman. Nearby, some panicked students called out to Professor Selina, waving her over. Selina rushed toward the training hall, sensing the heavy tension in the air. Back inside, Roger stepped even closer and slowly raised his right hand. To the onlookers, it looked like he was about to strike her down. Everyone braced for the worst, but instead, he just rested his hand on her shoulder. He quietly admitted that she was actually entirely correct about his status. The noblewoman stared back in absolute confusion, completely thrown off by his words. He calmly agreed that he was indeed a fallen member of the nobility. But since they were currently standing inside the academy, he was her professor. Because of that position, her insult was a direct challenge to his authority. He stared down, asking if she fully understood the weight of that action. She stayed completely silent, knowing she was entirely at fault for this whole mess. Meanwhile, Machiavelli kept talking, pointing out that she had only just arrived here. Adjusting to a brand new environment like this is never an easy thing for anyone. Still, despite everything, they decided to let her go. He chose to accept her explanation and let her slide just this once. Of course, she is still getting a formal reprimand for acting so rudely to her peer. The professor then turned and asked Reina if she was hurt, but she quickly reassured him she was perfectly fine. Relieved, he noted that was good, but he must now leave them under the supervision of Professor Selina, who quickly agreed. With that settled, the mysterious hero turned around and strode away into the distance. He disappeared down the path, while the class watched him go in quiet awe. Renee wondered if Mr. Roger actually knew her name and remembered her from class. After all, she was just an ordinary commoner who never stood out in school. As she thought back to his shocking intervention, she couldn't help but smile. She remembered his bold statement that everyone here was treated as equals. It was certainly surprising, but on the other hand, quite nice. Honestly, he wasn't as bad of a person as he first seemed. Suddenly, she felt she could actually trust him and follow his lead to succeed. Determined, she resolved to study even harder. Outside, the clear sky looked absolutely beautiful. Our main character headed out to get some fresh air and found a nearby bench. He sat down. Instantly, a blinding pain hit his skull. A stabbing migraine hit him as strange, unsettling sounds echoed deep inside his head. The strange ringing panicked him. Soon, this raging agony became completely unbearable. Desperate for relief, he frantically reached into his inner pocket for his medicine. Before he could grab the bottle, his vision blurred and things got rapidly worse. His consciousness was fading fast. He clutched his head in pure desperation. Slowly, the pain receded, and he could finally breathe a bit easier. Honestly, he had no idea how he would survive without those critical pills. It was too close. Why did this terrifying episode strike right now? He had almost exposed his fatal weakness right in front of his own students. The agonizing symptoms had flared up the moment he entered the training ground. At first, he managed to keep it under control through sheer willpower, but soon, as things took a turn for the worse, that loud-mouthed girl started making up lies. He simply couldn't ignore her nonsense. Hopefully, he did a good job. His face must have looked incredibly strained, and he probably didn't look very good. Holding the final bottle of medicine in his hands, he knew his time was running out. This supply would only last him another 5 days. Even worse, he'd have to rely on magic, since going directly to a public pharmacy was far too risky. A paper trail is too dangerous. He needed another way. He had to contact his supplier as soon as possible. Before long, a new school day started, and the protagonist found himself back at the academy office. Sitting with his fellow instructors, he asked if he had correctly heard the rumor. She smiled. Yes, a real werewolf was on the loose. Apparently, several terrified students reported seeing a massive dark figure last night. The creature was apparently spotted lurking in the city, perched right on top of a building. McCavely heard about the rooftop sighting and quickly brushed it off. He called it nothing more than a local ghost story, but Selena questioned him. Did he really believe that, especially with witnesses seeing it at Theon Academy? Professor Roger asked if that was true, prompting her to double down. She insisted it was absolutely true and was most likely a real werewolf. Honestly, seeing strange things around a magical academy is completely normal. In fact, rumors even whisper about the legendary 7 ghosts of Theon. Professor Roger had never heard of them, which completely surprised Selena. She realized he was clueless, while he noted she knew a lot of folklore. Flustered, Selena quickly begged him not to think she was a supernatural freak. She insisted she was not hunting down weird paranormal stories on purpose. She simply wanted to find interesting topics to connect with her students. So she did a bit of light research, definitely not because she was obsessed. McCavely calmly assured her it was a compliment, trying to ease her mind. He told her to relax, but she still felt incredibly self-conscious about it. Just then, another professor walked over, and trust me, she had some big questions. She mentioned hearing about the incredible technique Roger showed in his very first class. Apparently, he had pulled off a groundbreaking feat of rapid casting. She asked what he called this revolutionary spell creation method. Selena suddenly chimed in, shouting out that it is called source code. Her loud shout echoed, instantly drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. She immediately turned bright red, while Roger calmly confirmed she was right. Asked if those rumors were true, McCavely simply nodded without any hesitation. Matilda gasped in shock, completely stunned by his casual confirmation. The other teachers could hardly believe such a legendary spell actually existed. They stared at him in utter disbelief, whispering urgently among themselves. Roger noticed their intense staring, but he kept his cool demeanor. His colleague leaned in and warned him that everyone wanted his secret. They explained that rumors about Professor Roger's magic were spreading like wildfire. He realized the whole academy wanted to pry into his private techniques. He looked around the room, feeling the heavy weight of their greedy gazes. Selena asked him if he was really planning on sharing such valuable secrets. After all, securing a patent from the Magic Tower would make him filthy rich. But Professor Roger calmly replied that he had absolutely no interest in patents. Besides, patenting it would only paint a massive target on his back. If he let his guard down for even a second, someone would surely betray him. Even before the Magic Tower could reach out, his colleagues were already glaring. Their piercing stares were burning right through him. Talk about a hostile environment. He noticed Chris Benamor staring with a look that could literally kill. Still, his mind kept drifting back to the strange rumors about the werewolf. Once night fell over the city, McCavely decided not to stay cooped up inside. He prowled through the dark, quiet streets, noting how late it was getting. He figured a quick patrol was probably his best option. It was the perfect chance to search for that mysterious, elusive beast. Just as he paused, he realized the terrifying beast was lurking right behind him. He finally found the monster he was searching for, a werewolf. The beast saw him. With his back turned, the beast lunged. But Matchively sensed the attack instantly, easily slipping away from the sharp claws. Dodging at the absolute last second, the professor did not waste a single moment to counter. He immediately swung his leg around in a swift, devastating kick. The werewolf crashed hard. Machevely walked over. He smiled, asking if the monster really expected him to fall for such a trick. The monster knew he was completely trapped and in a terrible situation. He muttered that it had been so long he could not even pretend to be surprised. The beast slowly stood up, noting that a lot of time had passed. Our protagonist offered a calm smile, admitting that it really had been a very long time. He greeted his old acquaintance, Hans, who was still causing constant trouble. Naturally, the guy was always in chaos, leaving Machevely to wonder about his latest mess. Hans groaned, asking if Roger honestly thought he enjoyed living this way. He certainly did not expect the tiny dog in a nearby lady's arms to suddenly leap forward. The little dog suddenly bolted right at him, making Roger laugh at the sight. Hans growled in deep annoyance, demanding to know if Machevely actually found this situation funny. Of course it was, since Machevely was not the one suffering. You see, Hans is actually a normal human, but he has a major catch. The moment any animal bites him, his body instantly absorbs its genes and forces a transformation. It happens automatically, whether he wants it to or not. With his secret revealed, Hans desperately asked if Machevely had brought the antidote with him. Roger calmly pulled out a loaded syringe, confirming it was ready. Hans quickly snatched the syringe and injected it, thanking his friend for saving him yet again. Thankfully, the medicine worked quickly, and his body began to shift back. Slowly turning human again, Hans admitted he would have suffered for days without Machevely around. Roger smiled, noting that this wild scene reminded him of how they met. Back then, Machevely had received an official order to hunt a cryptid, only to find a chihuahua. Hans thanked God that Machevely had cured him of that embarrassing form. Otherwise, he would be dead, so Machevely quickly interrupted and warned him about using names. He pointed out that he now goes by the name Roger Selici. Hans remembered the letters Roger sent him. Still, he wondered why Roger became a professor and changed his identity. And why meet in Larisulk instead of the busy capital. Roger explained the whole situation. After hearing the full explanation, Hans could only grin in amazement. He highly praised Roger, calling him absolutely incredible and admitting he would have cracked under pressure. Anyone else would have blown their cover. How did he even survive? Roger simply replied that it was a very strict matter of life and death for him. In that situation, there was no other choice. Hans then asked another question. He eagerly wanted to know if Roger had actually joined some kind of secret organization. Roger confirmed he was with the First Order, but told him to stop laughing. He insisted it was serious, which immediately caused Hans to adopt a very thoughtful look. Roger asked if he knew the name, and his friend nodded slowly. Hans mentioned hearing rumors about some dangerous newcomers in the underworld who were being hunted. The First Order was apparently chasing them down. Hearing this, Roger went quiet. He felt completely sure it was them. Now he was curious to know what their company was called back then. Hans replied that if he remembered right, it was called Black Dawn. He noted that perhaps his comrade was indeed lucky to survive but one mistake and he would give himself away immediately. The hero replied that this was true and he had to be fully prepared. Speaking of which, did his friend bring the suitcase he had asked him for? Hans held it out, saying here it was. The hero asked if he had looked at what was inside. The werewolf replied that they were not crazy enough to fumble through his stuff, and even if they wanted to, they still could not open it. The hero said that Sheridan was probably still waiting, so he should tell him to apologize. His friend noted that nobody knew something like this would happen. There was nothing to apologize for. McCavely asked if this battle was so necessary. This medicine, then why did the letter ask him to wait 2 whole days, and why they could not meet immediately? Hans was totally surprised, not even asking what she meant, because he did not understand at all what Roger was talking. About, Roger asked what he meant, because just the day before yesterday he had heard rumors of a werewolf appearing. Hans noted that he had only arrived in Leatherwolf today. In that case, why wait 2 whole days for their conversation? After those words, an awkward pause settled right between them. But after a few moments, a sudden sound caught their attention, and it was the very werewolf they were just discussing. Hans was completely dumbfounded and turned to the older man, wondering what it was. Haros also paid close attention to the creature, realizing his suspicions were absolutely right, and so it turns out a real werewolf is sitting up on the roof of a nearby building. The creature was sitting there, making strange noises and staring upward. Hans said, "This was just horrible. Did it really exist?" Either way, it did not seem to notice them, so they should get out of there. McCavely noted that was impossible, and it would notice them if they moved. He thought the beast was hunting now. After a few moments, he stared closely at the monster and spotted a minor detail that caught his eye, namely, there was a strange trinket hanging around the werewolf's neck that looked familiar to him. His companion asked what it was, and then he saw it. The professor told him he had to check something right now. The younger one asked how, but he was going to get closer. Roger noticed that there was something glittering around the monster's neck, and it must have been hung there on purpose. Hans asked who would do something like that. The hero reloaded his weapon and said that now he knew. His companion watched him and noted that he had not seen him shoot in a very long time. The last time was when he was hunting down cryptids, but it turns out he had a completely different identity back then. Now it was unclear what his real name even was. McCavely replied that his name was Van Helsing, or more specifically, Abraham Van Helsing. A few moments later, the monster heard some sort of rustling sound coming from below. Immediately, the beast turned its attention there and spotted a person standing below. Naturally, the beast bared its teeth, because shredding prey was exactly what it needed. Without even thinking, the creature immediately lunged forward from its high perch. After sitting tight all this time, McCavely suddenly saw the beast materialize right beside him. Slowly, the werewolf lifted its head, making its deadly intentions crystal clear. Looking ahead, our hero realized that his earlier suspicion was completely spot on. The beast's neck was tightly bound by some kind of restraint. Naturally, he had endless questions, but those answers would come once he bagged this thing. The monster snarled like a wild beast and immediately lunged forward to attack him. McCavely backed away, keeping his distance, and quickly activated his magic technique. A glowing circle appeared right beneath his feet as he prepped his technique. This clever trick let him easily evade the monster, trying to rip him apart. But his luck ran out as his back hit a solid wall with nowhere left to run. Sensing an easy victory, the cornered beast lunged forward to finish him off. He thought he had won, but honestly, McCavely isn't even slightly worried. He just stood there, wearing a completely bored and nonchalant expression. Just before the strike landed, a smug smirk crept across his face. Those glowing magic circles were actually traps, and they all triggered at once. The monster took a direct hit, throwing its head back in absolute agony. Screaming in pain, the werewolf lost its footing and crashed hard onto its back. Something brutal was tearing through its mind, filling its head with agonizing noise. Agonizing, screeching sounds were literally tearing the beast's head apart. Watching from the sidelines, Hans wondered why the werewolf was suddenly acting so erratic. He even wondered if the creature had simply eaten something bad. McCavely answered his unspoken question by explaining the secret behind his magic. He used an ultrasonic frequency, inaudible to humans, but utterly deafening to beasts. At this rate, he wouldn't even need to waste an expensive silver bullet. Pulling a syringe from his coat, McCavely muttered that they'd soon find its origin. But before he could act, some strange noises caught his attention. He listened closely as distant voices yelled to head in this direction. The search party was closing in extremely fast, and they needed to move immediately. McCavely wondered if it was the police, questioning why they had to show up now. McCavely was briefly distracted by the noise of the approaching crowd. Taking advantage of the moment, the werewolf suddenly scrambled up and bolted. Seeing his target slip away, McCavely knew he couldn't let it escape. He quickly aimed his left arm, which concealed a hidden grappling hook. Firing it straight at the brick wall, he anchored himself securely. He hoisted himself into the air while the terrified beast kept running. The creature wanted no part of this guy, but McCavely was relentless. Gliding effortlessly through the air, McCavely vowed that he wouldn't let his target escape him. Below them, a loud voice shouted to check the rooftops for any movement. Another officer ordered the squad to detain anyone acting even slightly suspicious. Meanwhile, high above the streets, McCavely was quickly closing the gap. The once aggressive predator was now desperately running for its absolute life. It didn't dare slow down, suddenly leaping across the wide gap. The beast paused on the other side, thinking it had safely escaped. It thought it was safe, but it had seriously underestimated who it was dealing with. With an effortless leap, McCavely landed directly onto the very same moving train. As the professor landed, he calmly noted that his original plan was just to subdue the beast. But now the monster had left him with no other option, gathering his power. He manifested a massive magical shuriken in his hand, preparing to end this. Sensing a fight to the death, the werewolf lunged forward in a desperate assault. Knowing a clash was inevitable, the professor hurled his deadly weapon directly at the beast. The creature managed to dodge the flying blade with ease and kept charging forward. It seemed they were destined for a brutal, face-to-face duel in the next second. But the thrown weapon had other plans. Having flown past, the shuriken began looping back. Talk about a close call. The monster sensed the ambush and barely managed to evade. Machiavelli caught the returning blade and admitted the beast had pretty impressive reflexes. He gripped the weapon tightly, calmly praising the werewolf's surprisingly sharp defensive instincts. Honestly, his plan was to finish off the beast with that single opening blow. Since that failed, Machiavelli immediately shifted strategies as he finished his sentence. Thrusting his cane forward, he unleashed a sudden burst of concentrated magical energy. The heavy blast slammed directly into the monster, leaving it no time to react. With no intention of stopping, the professor began spinning his weapon in intricate arcs. The magical energy whirled chaotically through the air before suddenly shooting straight up. It then plummeted back down, striking the dazed creature right on the skull. That alone would not finish it. Knowing this, Sir Roger prepared his next strike. He launched himself forward, closing the distance the moment his initial spell connected. Terrified of his overwhelming aura, the werewolf frantically leapt backward to gain distance. Yet it still could not escape the tracking path of the returning magical shuriken. The blade cut deep, forcing a painful, agonizing wail from the wounded beast. In that exact fraction of a second, the professor was already overhead, ready to strike. But as he swung downward, the desperate creature managed to catch the weapon with its teeth. However, this was no ordinary cane. Inside lay a hidden blade, which he swiftly unsheathed. Sliding the sword free, he used the sudden momentum to pivot past the beast's guard. Now positioned perfectly behind his foe, he prepared the final, decisive blow. Completely free of the creature's grip, he unleashed another lightning-fast slash. The werewolf could only watch in terror as the cold steel reflected in its eyes. An instant later, the creature's head was sent flying from the sheer speed of the strike. That was the absolute power of Machiavelli's godlike swordsmanship. Meanwhile, a short distance down the road, his associate Hans was frantically running away. Hans muttered to himself that he was glad he did not get caught. His boss wanted to deal with the threat personally, so where on earth was he? As Hans kept walking and pondering this, something suddenly caught his eye from the side. A severed werewolf head tumbled out of nowhere and landed right at his feet. The sight absolutely startled him, and right behind it stepped out the professor. Machiavelli calmly asked Hans how he felt about the sudden turn of events. Hans grumbled that he should really give a warning next time because he almost dropped his suitcase. He stared down at the head, asking if this was the very werewolf they had avoided earlier. He begged the professor not to tell him they were just going to leave it here. Machiavelli casually replied that since he had finished analyzing it, he had no further use for it. Hans was bewildered, demanding to know why on earth he even carried the head back then. The professor just smiled, noting that his only goal was to give him a little surprise. That was his way of repaying him. Unlike him, the other guy succeeded, and it is just unfair. Roger mentioned that it turns out he is not even a real cryptid because of his artificial creation. Still, the hero thinks they should carry out their original plans. Hans asked if he meant that exact thing. Machiavelli replied that they should settle down around here because Leatherwalk is much better than the capital itself, giving them a distinct advantage. Hans then asked if he really wanted to stay in a city with a secret organization and Theon's academy. He pointed out the crazy experiments and violent street gangs everywhere, but Machiavelli replied that is exactly why they need to stay here since they can easily blend in. He just needs him to gather all the necessary information. Hans asked if he wanted him to do it alone, but the hero explained that his own moves are limited because they are watching. He needs to be kept informed before making his move. Hans replied that he understood completely, promising to handle it since he is a true professional. The hero knew he couldn't just wait for the situation to fix itself, but since he lacked the opportunity to take direct action right away, he had to at least do this one thing, namely, get in touch with his advisors. While dealing with the surprise of encountering a werewolf, the pendant on the beast proved he was an experimental subject, making the hero realize this was a highly unusual project. For now, the threat was dealt with, and he hoped to avoid further trouble. Soon, headlines were buzzing with news that mysterious murders continued to plague Leatherwalk, claiming 5 new lives just last Sunday. There are now 10 victims in total from these brutal acts. The identity of the killer remains completely unknown. For now, though, witnesses claim to have spotted a terrifying beast with thick black fur, the police insist it is just a madman whom they will quickly track down and arrest. Reading this, the hero noted how anxious the townspeople have become. Machiavelli realized that if these attacks happened on Sunday, they couldn't be his doing since he disposed of the werewolf on Saturday. His deep thoughts were cut short when a magic communication orb nearby suddenly began to glow. Shortly after, a formal meeting of teachers and professors commenced at the academy. Selena noticed Professor Roger and politely asked to sit next to him. The other teachers whispered, wondering if he was the legendary Roger Sissy. Some had heard rumors of him inventing an incredible spell, which seemed highly likely. But wasn't he just a fallen nobleman? That was certainly the impression he gave. As Machiavelli took his seat, Selena quietly asked if he had heard the latest news. It turns out 2 freshmen were brutally attacked last night. Fortunately, they both survived, but their severe wounds looked like they were inflicted by the sharp claws of some wild animal. Upon waking, the students claimed it was a terrifying beast. Selena believed the rumors from last week were true, meaning there were indeed casualties right here in Leatherwalk. Another woman suddenly interrupted their conversation to announce the rector's arrival, calling for absolute silence and decorum. She whispered to the protagonist, identifying the woman as the academy's esteemed professor of pharmacology, Marissa, who had been teaching at the academy for 20 years. Machiavelli quietly nodded, showing he understood. Moments later, the heavy doors swung open, and the rector stepped inside, looking far more with her usual bright and cheerful demeanor. She reveals the true reason behind this sudden gathering. A dangerous criminal has somehow infiltrated the secure grounds of Theon Academy. Nobody knows who is responsible for the crime yet, but a few eyewitnesses have already come forward, Hold on, they are actually talking about an absolute monster, a werewolf. But one of the professors immediately stands up to protest and object to her claim. He insists that a werewolf is impossible, claiming it must be some misunderstanding. Elizabeth slowly turns her head, locking her cold eyes directly onto the man who just spoke. She looks directly at the man, asking if Professor Hugo has anything useful to say. The old man scoffs in reply, reminding everyone that the Empire itself fully protects this institution. Thus, he cannot understand why such a dangerous creature would ever be here. He warns everyone to ignore the ridiculous stories about ghosts haunting the academy. The rector cuts him off, demanding to know if he forgot about the 2 recent casualties. Hugo fires back, claiming he heard her perfectly well the first time. That is precisely why he refuses to believe a mindless werewolf is behind these targeted murders. Both tragic victims were noble, yes, every single one. Elizabeth narrows her eyes, staring directly at the old man. The old man continues insolently, suggesting that the killer is likely one of their very own students. He points the finger directly at the commoners, making Elizabeth glare in disbelief. She demands to know what he is implying with such a wild accusation. He pushes further, asking why only nobles have been targeted out of all the academy students. Does she genuinely believe a wild beast planned this so precisely? It is far more likely that a student is simply posing as a monster. Hearing his words, the other noble faction teachers immediately begin whispering and nodding in agreement. They blame commoners. He remains totally silent, Machiavelli listens carefully. He quietly observes the chaos, realizing his original plan might face a major setback. His original plans are completely ruined by this sudden, heated division. These fools are inciting division right when the academy needs to stand united. And yet, this petty political drama is actively playing out inside the continent's most elite academy. As Machiavelli sits lost in these heavy thoughts, something suddenly lands on his shoulder. Naturally, he feels the small touch and looks down immediately. Looking down at his jacket, he spots a tiny insect that looks like some kind of bug. This is no ordinary insect, but a covert delivery device. He carefully plucks the bug from his shoulder, turning it over to examine the tiny creature. Peering closely, he detects a hidden transmission etched onto its shell. The text is microscopic, making it incredibly difficult to decipher. Despite the incredibly tiny font, Machiavelli concentrates and slowly manages to decipher the entire hidden message. 3 experimental test subjects have escaped, the message warns, capture or eliminate. They are a massive threat, capable of exposing his true identity if they are not silenced. He reads the grim warning. Pure rage now boils deep inside. His fist tightens, he forces a calm expression. Inside, he is absolutely spiraling with dread, wondering why he has to face all this trouble. Sitting right next to him, Selena senses the sudden shift in his mood. She softly asks Roger if he is feeling sick, her brow furrowing with genuine concern for him. He brushes it off with a quick, reassuring smile, claiming he is fine. But internally, he knows this werewolf incident is directly linked to his escapees. Even the Black Dawn did not expect things to spiral out of control. Shaking up their massive influence is actually a good thing, but there is a catch. Our undercover hero cannot afford to have his true identity exposed right now. And honestly, he cannot just sit back, he has to secure those subjects. He must beat Theon to them. Meanwhile, Elizabeth pulls Professor Hugo aside. She tells him to voice his opinions, but to focus on his duties. Hugo asks if security will be tightened, and she confirms that it will. She orders him to warn the students against leaving their dorms late at night. Demerit points will be handed out as punishment. That is her final decree. Hugo nods in agreement, understanding her decision. Elizabeth then ends the meeting. She wishes them all a productive day, dismissing the room. The teachers leave. They whisper among themselves as they walk out. Meanwhile, our main character cannot simply sit still. He decides to patrol the academy grounds instead. Passing by a secluded path, he suddenly freezes right in his tracks. He feels a presence lingering behind him, someone lurking behind a nearby tree. He commands the shadow to stop hiding and step out. It is a young girl. She has been tailing him, looking tense. Machiavelli watches her closely. He recognizes her as one of the students sitting in his lectures. She looks completely terrified, struggling to find the words to speak. He stares at her, wondering if she was the one who called him. A First Order member when they first crossed paths. Now she is here. But wait, why is she posing as a student? This is seriously suspicious. To get some answers, he asks what she wants. She flinches instantly. She stammers, unable to form a coherent sentence. Sir Roger notices her anxiety. He suggests they find a private spot and tells her to follow him. She silently nods in agreement. He then casually offers to buy her coffee. The girl blinks in utter confusion, asking him to repeat himself. Despite her shock, they make their way to the campus cafeteria together. Sitting face to face, a heavy silence hangs between them before they speak. He asks for her name, and she introduces herself as Sylvia Rochin. The professor assumes this is just a fake name to protect her identity. He asks for her actual name, but the young student looks flustered. She insists that Sylvia Rochin is indeed her birth name. Machiavelli is genuinely taken aback, realizing she might not be using an alias. He tells her that if she has something to report, she should speak up. She glances around nervously, pointing out that too many people are nearby. He calmly reassures her that he has already cast a soundproofing barrier around them. No one outside their magic circle will hear a single word they say. She mutters that such skill is exactly what she expected of a First Order member. Roger tells her to drop that title and address him as professor instead. She protests, claiming that doing so would be highly disrespectful, but Machiavelli firmly states that this is an order she must obey for safety. Looking down, the girl quietly submits and promises to comply. Our hero guides the conversation back to business, asking her to explain the current crisis. Sylvia nods, preparing to lay out the dark truth of what is really happening. Factions allied with them are pulling strings behind the recent werewolf attacks. They run dark magic experiments on cryptids, following forbidden teachings. The rogue school of Shamsis consists of outcast scientists banished from society. Exile was their punishment for conducting illegal tests. Still, she lacks details. Though the exact research remains a mystery, the test subjects broke free. Escaping through the sewers, the beasts unleashed a brutal massacre at the academy. Embarrassed by her rambling, Sylvia quickly apologizes for talking way too much. But the professor gently reassures her, saying it is perfectly fine to continue. Fully aware that Shamsis is responsible, she updates the professor on her mission. He was requested to handle it, which is why she is here now on orders. Victor Dreadful let him use the name, and the hero admits he agreed. He never expected things to get this messy, but some names command respect. Warning him, she stresses that the current situation is spiraling out of control. They must act quickly, which means they need to eliminate 3 dangerous targets. But the hero corrects her, saying there are actually only 2 targets left. To help her understand his meaning, he displays the completed token. Sylvia instantly recognizes the object, demanding to know where he found it. Machiavelli explains that 2 days ago he faced a werewolf in Lazaralk. She notes. It was adorable. Meanwhile, the hero wonders how she contacted him so safely. Her cover remains intact, meaning she has not raised any outside suspicion. It remains unclear why such a talented girl is still in the Third Order. Perhaps she had no choice, especially if she comes from a noble family. Radical organizations rarely treat highborn nobles with any kind of respect. She is likely just a puppet, waiting to be discarded once her role ends. Recently, he realized just how fragile the Academy's current position really is. Now he knows the delicate balance of the Black Dawn has shattered as well. Sylvia might be able to help him in this mess, McCavely notes. She mentioned not escaping through the sewers, meaning they must search her. If so, does the Academy have that information? The girl answers that he is correct, but doubts how long they can stay. Hidden in the dark, standing up, the professor says he fully understands. Activating his power, he tells her he is grateful she contacted him. He promises they will meet again if possible, leaving the girl hesitating. She addresses Professor Roger, who turns around and asks if there is anything else. It turns out her explanation was much more helpful. He happily listens and hopes their next meeting is just as successful. With that, he simply walks away. She stays silent, but she clearly liked this positive news. Meanwhile, Sylvia sits there feeling quite embarrassed and cannot get a single word out of her mouth. Once the professor is gone, she finally mutters a belated thank you. But it is too late. She remains seated in the cafe, staring down in silence. Meanwhile, someone outside is watching her closely through the window. It is another academy student, wondering what she is feeling right now. But is that really what she is thinking? Shifting her attention to the instructor, she immediately wonders if some dark magic was actually used on her. Why cast that spell there? It made no sense. What were they even discussing? Days passed after the incident, and the school slowly quieted back down. Now most of the students sat together in the crowded lecture hall. Flora sat there as well, completely ignoring the professor's loud voice. Her mind was trapped. She only thought about that strange secret conversation. Remembering the vibrant magical field in the cafe, she was quite sure. The unique color definitely pointed to a classic, sound-blocking magic spell. Such a faint magical residue remained entirely invisible to normal people. But why use it? What secret were they desperately trying to protect? Suddenly, the professor closed her heavy book and dismissed the class. She warned everyone that the rumors were real, no wandering around late. Breaking curfew meant losing points, which immediately got the students gossiping about the werewolf. Of course, everyone knew the legend, and some brave guys wanted to go hunt it. Catching the beast sounded incredibly exciting, but a smart friend quickly brought up the rules. Getting caught out there meant losing their highly valuable academy points. The first student argued they could easily sneak past and get the reward. After all, the prize was massive. Leo turned and asked Adrian's opinion. Adrian shook his head, preferring to keep his points safe from danger. Leo chuckled. He knew his careful friend would choose the safe route. Honestly, risking their academy standing was just not worth the trouble. They should definitely leave the dangerous werewolf hunting to the experienced professors. But right then, an incredibly angry classmate marched straight up to their table. She slammed her hand down violently, instantly startling the young boys. Leo nervously offered a polite morning greeting, but Tracy was furious. She snapped back, demanding to know how this could possibly be good. Leo tried to calm her down, suggesting she finally accept her defeat. Tracy snapped that it was a draw, telling him to stay out. This issue was strictly between her and Adrian, she pointed at him. She declared she was not holding back, demanding a real rematch. Adrian calmly replied that he had absolutely zero interest in fighting her ever again. Tracy demanded to know why, so he simply pointed to his schedule. He had classes all day and curfew at night, no hunting werewolves. Tracy scoffed at his excuses, calling him a total coward for running. Adrian did not even bother to argue, which made her even angrier. But instead of losing his cool at her insult, Adrian just flashed a polite smile. He calmly told her she was perfectly welcome to think that way. Tracy growled, realizing she had to settle their score another way. Adrian asked what she meant, and she brought up the werewolf. She proposed a contest. Whoever captured the wild beast first would win. Adrian tried to decline the contest, but Leo suddenly cut in and accepted the challenge. Adrian stared at his friend in total disbelief, completely baffled by his choice. Tracy smiled, declaring the deal was official, warning them not to back out. Tracy smirked, declaring their deal official, and warned them not to run away. Leo promised they would show up, telling her not to cry later. Soon, Tracy walked away, leaving Adrian to demand why Leo had accepted such a deal. Leo insisted that Tracy wouldn't fall behind, especially with all the academy teachers around. They would handle the werewolf first, but his friend warned that she seemed dead serious. Leo insisted she wasn't foolish enough to go after a dangerous beast all by herself. The bespectacled man sighed, admitting she honestly wasn't prepared to face something like that yet. He agreed she likely wouldn't act rashly, but then a terrifying thought suddenly struck them. They bolted from their chairs, rushing over to peer anxiously through the large window. They searched for Tracy, trying to see which path she had taken. One wondered aloud. How could she have vanished so quickly? She must be heading straight to her dormitory. Adrian whispered a silent prayer of thanks that Tracy had kept her head, but then, just a moment later, the girl veered off. She wasn't headed to her room. Instead, she was marching right toward the monster they had discussed the other day. By the time Leo spotted her and realized her suicidal plan, it was already too late. The crisis was unfolding fast. Later that night, silence fell over the sprawling academy grounds. Deep in the dark hours, the academy teacher, Machiavelli, was out patrolling the deserted roads. He avoided his warm bed, preferring to keep a watchful eye on the dark, quiet paths. Suddenly he froze. An unexpected sound caught his ear, shattering the heavy silence of the night. But before he could investigate, a professor approached him, proposing a very questionable deal. Machiavelli questioned the man, asking if he was offering to restore his family honor. All he had to do in return was closely watch over the highborn noble students. The professor smiled, suggesting a small favor wouldn't hurt anyone. But Machiavelli knew dealing with this corrupt professor would only bring trouble. Still, maintaining good relations with the faculty had some clear benefits, especially when dealing with the Lady Rector, but Professor Roger refused to drop it. The man asked Machiavelli what he meant. The young teacher kept his ground. He stated firmly that the academy makes no distinction between nobles and commoners. Nothing would ever change his mind. Bowing slightly, he excused himself to finish his rounds. The professor tried to stop him, urging Machiavelli to listen to reason. But Machiavelli knew this deal was a trap. Taking it would surely expose him. He had absolutely no interest in getting caught, nor did he want to risk his position. Most importantly, angering the Lady Rector was a terrible idea. He walked away. Walking down the dark path, a strange rustling sound caught his attention. He approached the noise, instantly cornering a group of students hiding in the darkness. Machiavelli stared down at them, demanding to know why they weren't in their dorms. One boy stammered nervously, pleading that this wasn't what it looked like. Machiavelli didn't care for excuses. He coldly docked them 5 demerit points each. That made 20 caught tonight. It was quickly getting out of hand. He knew there was a hefty bounty on the werewolf, but this was ridiculous. Even the threat of losing academy points wasn't stopping these reckless kids. At this rate, things would spiral completely out of control before morning. The young teacher had to do whatever it took to prevent a major disaster. He soon made his way to the sewage treatment plant near the school grounds. Descending into the dark sewers, he recalled Sylvia's warnings about werewolf movements. She mentioned that the beasts could never slip through this specific underground path. It was the only entryway into Lazarwalk. Dropping down, Machiavelli looked around. He conjured a spark of light magic, illuminating the pitch-black tunnels ahead. Roger noticed the local police completely bypassed this area. Up ahead, he spotted some fresh tracks. He saw clear footprints, definitely left by werewolves, but could there really be? 2 of them here. The size difference suggested one massive beast and another slightly smaller one. The paw prints headed straight forward, and the professor hoped the trail would hold. He prayed the tracks wouldn't just vanish halfway. For a while he quietly pursued the path carved by those beasts, almost making it out of the musty sewer, but then the tracks split in 2 directions, which was incredibly bad news. Roger stared at the fork, finally picking one path to investigate first. But as he moved, he realized the giant werewolf was heading somewhere else entirely. It was heading straight for the academy, likely already hunting for its next meal. Without a doubt, this monster posed the absolute highest threat to everyone on campus. The beast was probably stalking another victim, making you wonder who is next. But right as Roger McCavely was piecing this together, he caught a sudden noise from outside, a scream, filled with absolute terror. The cry was distant, filtering through a thick patch of wild bushes. The professor immediately bolted in that direction, knowing he had to act fast. Following the tracks would take way too long, so he ran straight toward the voice. Within moments, he broke through the brush to see two girls cornered by the beast. The giant werewolf he was hunting was actively clawing its way toward them. Roger recognized them as students from his academy, struggling to hold their ground. They desperately tried to defend themselves, but he was too far to reach them. Running would take too long, so he instantly readied his ranged weapon. He fired, a magic spell erupted, hurtling forward like a missile. The monster sensed the danger, but it was already too late. The brilliant light hit them instantly. The beast had zero time to react. Blinded by the magic, the werewolf shielded his face with both claws. Roger did not hesitate, closing the gap in seconds to press his advantage. He delivered a bone-shattering strike, sending the massive monster flying back into the dirt. The professor landed smoothly right in front of his trembling students. They stared at him, absolutely stunned to see Professor Roger standing there. Roger barely spared them a glance, calling out Renee and his other student. The Princess Adriana Vancillion. Renee squeaked in surprise, confirming they were safe. They wondered what he would do next, but Roger just glared at them. In an angry voice, he declared they would each receive 5 penalty points. Hearing this, the girls stood frozen, dumbfounded by his harshness. They asked him what he meant, and Adriana was thoroughly taken aback. The princess begged him to wait, arguing he should first check if they were okay. Roger scoffed. How did she even dare to talk back now? Adriana replied she was only trying to help, but the professor snapped back. He pointed out she completely ignored her own safety and was now talking back. Renee quickly stepped in, pleading with the angry professor to spare them. Roger McCavely demanded to know what on earth she was talking about. Renee hesitated, admitting she had accidentally fallen asleep while studying. The professor sighed, thanking her for the dedication but warning her of the danger. She had to understand just how incredibly serious this situation was. She realized her mistake and quickly apologized, but the professor was already looking away. He focused on the princess, who kept smiling sweetly, completely oblivious to the rising danger. Turning to Adriana, he instructed her to escort Renee back to the dormitory. He promised not to hand out any penalty points, which made Renee perk up and ask. She wanted to make sure, so Machiavelli joked that he could always change his mind. Adriana didn't argue and immediately began guiding the younger girl away. She insisted they had to leave right now, and Renee reluctantly agreed with her. But just as the students began walking away, the massive werewolf locked eyes with them. Spotting the danger, they quickly yelled for the professor to watch his back. He saw everything perfectly clearly. Meanwhile, the dark beast lurked. It shook off the effects of the previous spell and prepared to launch an attack. But right before striking, the creature suddenly leapt backward in a different direction. The girls shouted that the beast was fleeing, prompting Machiavelli to give chase. He screamed for his students to find a safe spot and hide immediately. A high-stakes pursuit instantly began between the brave instructor and the feral monster. The very beast that wanted to tear him apart was now desperately running away. Realizing he couldn't shake his pursuer, the werewolf scrambled up toward the rooftops. The professor, however, absolutely refused to let it go. Using a hook held firmly in his left hand, he launched himself forward after it. Both girls ran for safety, but kept their eyes glued to the intense chase. Renee pointed toward the roofs and told her companion to take a closer look. She wondered if it was levitation magic, prompting her friend to inspect the scene. Adriana watched closely and realized she was likely right. Up above, the beast hung. It clung to a roof edge while Machiavelli suspended himself nearby, staring it down. Staring across the gap, the professor knew there was no time to waste. He didn't hesitate, the man lunged forward instantly. Seeing the incoming assault, the creature bared its fangs and leapt forward to clash. The two forces collided in midair, weapons and claws striking with brutal force. Sparks flew as they traded rapid blows, leaping back only to strike again. They tried every tactic in their arsenal before suddenly pulling back to regroup. Both stood tense, scanning for weaknesses, but this quiet moment didn't last long. The savage beast charged again, but Machiavelli swiftly evaded the strike. Slipping past the claws, Machiavelli thrust his weapon forward to retaliate. He unleashed a concentrated orb of magical energy directly at his foe. The spell hit dead center, and the professor immediately leapt after it. He aimed to catch the beast off guard from behind, springing high into the air. His blade came down with full force while the students watched in awe. The scale of the battle completely blew them away. In that moment, the princess wondered if this was what true combat felt like. The werewolf, however, refused to yield. It leapt up wildly, aiming a desperate, heavy blow directly at the professor's head. Machiavelli easily recovered his footing and prepared another swift counterattack. His counter was incredibly fast, finding its mark before the beast could react. The point-blank impact sent the massive werewolf flying backward across the cold tiles. It slid precariously close to the edge, nearly tumbling off the building entirely. But the beast dug its claws in. Meanwhile, Machiavelli was already pressing his advantage. He points his weapon at his opponent. A quick spell is cast. It connects. The massive impact sends the beast flying backward through the air. The monster wails in agony before crashing down, completely still on the dirt. Machiavelli catches his breath. He feels the fatigue of draining his mana. Unleashing so much magic at once was a risk, but he had no choice. He definitely cannot let the students see him use magic out here. This werewolf needs to be dealt with quickly so he can find the other. Machiavelli walks down. As he draws closer, he spots the creature moving. It tries to strike, making him wonder how it is still conscious. But the beast isn't throwing a punch. It grabs a nearby rock instead. The professor watches this, quite surprised by the sheer ingenuity of the wild beast. Without hesitating, the werewolf hurls the heavy stone directly at him. It throws the weapon with everything it has, desperate to fight back. Naturally, Machiavelli escapes this sudden throwing attack completely unscathed. A magic barrier easily blocks it, but the creature's intelligence is shocking. It is rare for such beasts to use weapons. The wolf recovers. The beast immediately leaps back up, launching another wild attack at the professor. Targeting the exact spot where Machiavelli stands, the beast lunges forward. Machiavelli leaps away. He is pretty amazed by how clever this opponent is. The creature is showing some seriously impressive, human-like strategy in battle. Clearly, a wild wolf was used as the foundation to create this monster. But this thing is smart enough to gauge its opponent's overall strength. Seeing this level of intelligence triggers a very dark realization for the professor. Perhaps they aren't actually werewolves at all. Meanwhile, deep in the dark forest, several students are out searching for Tracy. Adrian desperately tries calling her phone. There is no answer. Leo grumbles that they should just head home. He is quite sure they won't find her out here in the dark anyway. She is probably just relaxing in the dorms, completely oblivious to them. Adrian insists they can't be sure, regretting that they even made this foolish bet. Leo asks if Adrian really believes she's still out there hunting that werewolf. Adjusting his glasses, Adrian replies that she is exactly that stubborn. Anyone else might have given up by now, but certainly not Tracy. Leo has to agree with that, suggesting they look for another 30 minutes. If they don't find any trace of her by then, they are heading back. Right at that moment, a faint shout echoes through the trees. Leo suddenly bolts. He yells to Adrian if he heard that, they need to run. That must be their friend in trouble, so they have to hurry. The two boys dash forward through the thick woods together. Adrian leads the way, pushing past branches until he spots a shape. Suddenly, he collides headfirst with someone rushing from the opposite direction. The heavy impact sends them both tumbling onto the cold ground. Adrian groans, rubbing his aching head. Leo asks if it is Tracy. The woman looks up, asking what they are doing out here. Adrian immediately claims they heard a scream, but she looks entirely puzzled. She asks how that is possible, insisting there was absolutely no shouting. Suddenly, a growl echoes from the bushes, and one of the guys notes how strange it sounds. Tracy tells them to keep quiet and follow her deeper into the brush. The group listens to her, slowly creeping forward directly behind her. Peeking out from the leaves, they completely miss the creature hiding nearby. Only its snout pokes out, spotted. When they see it, they wonder. Is it a werewolf? It is just so tiny. Tracy immediately gloats, claiming victory. She wants to know what they think now, but Leo points out she only found it. Besides, the bet was about catching it. Tracy snaps back that she will grab it right now. She is ready to capture it, but Adrian tells her to hold on a second. Claiming she knows he hates to lose, she refuses to hand over victory. But Adrian sighs, telling her she has completely missed the point. Look closer, he says. The little creature is wounded and cannot move. It simply found a quiet spot to hide, or maybe someone hid it here. Tracy recalls the rumors that two werewolves were roaming around. Adrian admits he is not sure, but if this cub has backup, they are in trouble. Suddenly, he freezes up. His attention locks onto something completely unexpected. There is some kind of target collar fastened around the creature's neck. The bespectacled teen stares at it, completely baffled by what it could mean. Some strange device is definitely strapped to its throat. He wonders why. But as they focus ahead, watch this, a massive werewolf towers behind them. The beast catches their scent, knowing its prey is right within reach. It begins to growl, dripping thick drool onto the forest floor. Danger. Leo is the first to sense it. He spins around in shock. Realizing the monster is about to strike his friend, he screams a warning. He shoves Adrian out of the path of the beast's incoming claws. The slash connects squarely with Leo, the guy who just saved his teammate. That brutal blow sends him flying through the air before he crashes down. Too fast, the beast reaches out and grabs Adrian right by the head. Tracy freezes. Is this real? She forces herself to breathe, trying to stop the shaking. Her limbs are trembling violently, but she tells herself she can win this. She has to fight for the honor of her family and secure this victory. Seeing the threat from the girl, the monster instantly lunges her way. But Adrian throws himself in the path of the strike to shield Tracy. She is completely stunned by his selfless act of putting his body on the line. Leo, pulling himself back from the edge of the fight, watches in disbelief. Miraculously, the glasses-wearing teen is okay, quickly asking if Tracy is unhurt. She asks him why on earth he would risk his life to protect her. Why? Because he could never stand by while his friend is in danger. But while they argue, the towering beast prepares for another lethal charge. Adrian realizes what is happening and yells for his friends to stay calm. He tells them not to panic, realizing the beast is just protecting its cub. Turning slowly to face the giant beast, he keeps his hands open and low. He asks if he guessed right. Tracy yells at him, saying the monster cannot understand him. But Adrian softly reassures them that everything is fine and he won't cause any harm. He raises his palms to show he poses absolutely no threat to them. Amazingly, the beast understood. It turned, heading in a completely different direction. It ended up stopping right next to the young kid who was hiding. Deep in the bushes, the creature let out a low, menacing growl. He realized the truth. The beast was only acting out of fear for its cub. Surprised, the girl asked if it truly understood, but Leo remained completely unconvinced. He warned the others, a wild creature like this could snap at any moment. Adrian turned, admitting his theory sounded wild. He begged them to trust him. Begging for their trust, he slowly stepped forward. He urged the creature to listen. He meant no harm. Did the massive creature understand his peaceful words? Realizing the little cub was sick, Adrian gently held up a glowing medicine flask. This potion will not cure the cub, but it will make him feel better. Once again it worked. The creature seemed to grasp his kind words. It approached slowly. Adrian held out the small flask of magical medicine. The werewolf reached out with surprising gentleness, but their peaceful moment was shattered. A sharp burst of offensive magic pierced the creature's stomach. Yelping in absolute agony, the beast collapsed as the foreign magic began spreading. The spell wrapped around its limbs, acting like tight, glowing restraints. Then the caster appeared. It was none other than Professor Roger. The professor confronted his students, and they immediately turned to him in terror. He demanded to know what on earth they were doing here. Tracy and the other students froze, realizing they were in massive trouble. They hesitated, stammering in fear, and nobody knew what excuse to make. McHavely stepped forward, quickly promising they would explain everything later on. For now, he urged them to head back to the dorms, which the boy and the catgirl quickly agreed to. But Adrian refused to move, shielding the wounded werewolf with his own body. He yelled to the professor. He believes the werewolf understands speech. "Think before you kill it, please," the desperate student begged Roger. Professor Roger coldly scoffed, asking if Adrian realized how stupid he sounded. "It is not nonsense at all. This creature is special," Adrian fiercely insisted. The professor turned. He stared coldly at the captive monster. Adrian shivered. The creature's eyes were full of sharp intelligence. He felt deeply unsettled, unsure of what would happen next. Suddenly, Roger grabbed his arm. He shoved him aside violently. Adrian hit the ground. He looked up in utter confusion. What did that cold look actually mean? Looking back, he watched in horror as the professor readied another spell. Aiming directly at the werewolf, a massive stream of fire erupted. The blazing heat roared ahead, while Adrian watched from the ground. He was helpless. The cold professor completely ignored the students. "You will all receive your punishment tomorrow," the professor said coldly. "Now return to your dorm rooms immediately. No more excuses." The tense night slowly passed, and a depressing new day finally arrived. The downcast group sat together at the table. Leo groaned in absolute despair. "We are finished. It was incredibly stupid of us," he muttered. They had failed miserably, getting caught right in front of Roger. Embarrassed beyond belief, Tracy realized there was absolutely nothing she could do. Sinking deep into her thoughts for a long moment, she slowly turned her eyes sideways. The boy beside her, Adrian, sat completely silent with his eyes locked firmly onto the cold stone floor. He sat there deeply troubled. Soon, the heavy room door clicked open. The rector stepped inside with a wide smile on her face, greeting them with total ease. Our main character stood right behind her, though the students barely noticed. Instead of looking at him, they gasped in shock at seeing Mrs. Elizabeth. Noticing their terrified faces, the headmistress gently assured them there was no need to panic. They should just relax, she said, because this was not some major interrogation. But deep down in their hearts, the kids knew her presence meant serious trouble was coming. No easy escape. Professor Roger stepped forward and broke the heavy silence. He asked why they thought they were summoned, and Leo immediately spoke up to answer. They expected a harsh punishment far worse than simple penalty points. Roger nodded coldly, reminding them just how reckless and stubborn their action last night was. A single mistake, and they would have had more casualties on their hands. The kids kept entirely quiet, fully realizing how badly they had messed up this time. "Keep your chins up," the rector suddenly said, a warm grin appearing. After all, things turned out fine, and she playfully told Roger to stop scaring them. The professor sighed, arguing they could not just ignore the academy rules. Elizabeth chuckled softly, wondering if it was really so bad since the entire crisis had been resolved. He quickly recapped the entire situation, keeping his deep tone serious. Turning her sharp gaze to Adrian, she asked if he really risked his life to protect Tracy. The boy tensed, stammering that it was not exactly like that. The rector merely smiled, quite certain he was just being modest about his brave actions. Even so, they still had to face the reality of their dangerous actions. They would each receive 10 penalty points, but she was not genuinely angry with them. Talk about a major plot twist, they actually earned 20 points instead. The kids gasped in total shock, staring at her in absolute, wide-eyed disbelief as they listened. She turned to the professor, teasingly asking if he had any objections. Roger muttered that he would never dare to cross her authority, which made her smile. With a laugh, she dismissed them, sending them back to their class. They scrambled out of the room, though Adrian lingered for a brief second at the door. He cast a final look at Roger before leaving, and the rector noticed. She asked if Roger was satisfied, surprised he wanted her to go easy on them. Roger nodded, thanking her while hoping his plea remained completely secret. Elizabeth promised to keep quiet, immediately shifting the entire subject to the mystery of the wild werewolves. Did he notice anything strange out there? The professor shook his head. Absolutely nothing out of the ordinary had caught his eye during the entirety of the chaotic fight. The headmistress nodded her head, thanking him deeply for his relentless dedication. Since nobody got hurt, she encouraged him to keep up the excellent work in the future. She left soon after, leaving the tired professor alone with his thoughts. But Roger could not shake the nagging feeling, absolutely certain he had glimpsed something hidden. While the massive werewolf remained bound, a small shadow began to crawl out. Emerging slowly from the thick, carefully concealed bushes, the beast was a truly striking sight to behold. Recalling the crazy scene, Roger felt a sudden chill. The professor stared at the creature, wondering about the clearly human traits he saw before him. The poor soul had not completed the conversion, leaving him trapped as a half-formed beast. Facing this grim reality, the professor realized these twisted experiments were never meant for wild wolves as he originally believed. Instead, they were being performed directly on innocent people, dragged in and forcibly changed into beasts. Adrian was deeply entangled in all this, but he did not regret his brutal choice. If he had not acted, he would have been dead. He was also driven by the sheer weight of how many innocent lives had already suffered under their cruel hands because of this horrible mess. He had no other option but to put them down. Lost in thought, he recalled the young werewolf's fragile, terrified face right before he died. At that moment, deep grief hit him, knowing this tragedy never should have happened. Sparing no time, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glowing communication sphere, quietly slipping away with his ally to privately discuss something. He whispered into the device to let Hans know he had a crucial request. Meanwhile, Tracy sat on a bench with her friends, sounding incredibly surprised. Who would have thought they would escape penalties and actually score extra points instead? After celebrating their luck, she turned to Leo and asked how his arm was doing. He smiled, saying it was fine, but he still had to wear a bandage. Tracy then looked over at Adrian, who sat nearby, looking incredibly lost in thought. She asked what was troubling him so deeply, but the boy hesitated quickly. Claiming he was all right and just had some things on his mind, he asked if they remembered that young werewolf they encountered, especially the bizarre collar around its neck. Tracy gasped loudly, prompting the others to tell her to quiet down. The bespectacled boy adjusted his glasses and noted that this mystery was exactly why. He tried to stop Professor Roger. What if these beasts were artificially created? Leo chimed in, mentioning dark rumors about some very suspicious people lurking around the Academy of Theon. Tracy frowned, asking if that was just made up. Leo admitted he could not say for sure, but pointed out that collared werewolf is incredibly strange. Surely there is a massive conspiracy hiding behind it. Tracy turned to Adrian, asking if he suspected anything specific about Professor Roger. Adrian nodded, admitting he did not have solid proof of anything. But the professor's expression lately had been deeply unsettling, he could tell that. On that fateful night, the professor had witnessed something that genuinely shocked him. Tracy leaned closer, whispering if they believed Roger was hiding secrets from them. Adrian sighed, saying he was not certain, but Roger definitely knew far more. Then he let on, then again, maybe it was all just his wild imagination. A respected professor from Theon would never do something so terrible. But what if the dark rumors actually turn out to be true? What if Professor Roger is secretly tied to all these horrifying events? Adrian's deep thoughts were suddenly interrupted as Tracy stood up, declaring those worries to be absolutely ridiculous. She laughed, telling them they were both overthinking things way too much. Had they already forgotten what Mrs. Rector had explained to them so recently? The woman shared every single detail of the incident. Would the professor act like this if he was actually involved in such a dark conspiracy? He hides it well, but he genuinely cares about his students. Suspecting him after everything he did is just. Adrian stood up, agreeing that Tracy actually had a pretty solid point. His friend nodded in agreement. Honestly, what was the point of digging? Besides, his stomach was growling. Leo spoke up, saying it was time for food. Since it was already lunchtime, he invited Tracy to tag along with them. She blinked in surprise, asking if they really wanted her to tag along. The boy with glasses hesitated, muttering that it was just a normal thing. You know, just friends eating together. He asked if they were friends. Tracy flushed red at the question, feeling quite embarrassed by his words. She stammered a bit before replying that she guessed she could agree. The boys cheered, happy she agreed. Meanwhile, a contact called Machiavelli, asking if he had looked at the files he sent. Machiavelli confirmed he had already gone through them. Inside was a chilling list, every single missing person in Lazarwelk. It mapped out all their public hangouts. Han mentioned some suspicious leads. He knew a group of dangerous thugs, always loitering near an abandoned factory. Exactly what they needed. The professor nodded, calling it a perfect lead. The contact added some grim news about the other case he wanted checked. Several outskirts workers had vanished without a trace over the last few days. Machiavelli asked if a family of 3 was among them. The contact replied. Yes, Stan replied. It was the only case of an entire family vanishing. It made sense now. Machiavelli promised to check out that factory himself. Now watch, this is where things get serious as Machiavelli heads out tonight. Inside the damp warehouse, a few guards gathered around, bored out of their minds. One complained loudly, asking how much longer they had to rot in this place. His partner grunted, saying it would probably be at least 2 more days. He wondered how those damn test subjects managed to break out anyway. The other guard sighed, more concerned with the sheer incompetence of the staff. Apparently, some kid did not get enough of the experimental drug. When they tried to double the dose, the boy started screaming and crying. The kid threw a massive tantrum, waking up the entire damn facility. Worse, no one wanted to face his furious parents when they saw him. The guard laughed, asking if those parents were not already turned into werewolves. Did they actually care? The guard scoffed, saying they definitely did. Either way, they caused total chaos and ran, but they had an inside man. A powerful fixer who was supposed to clean up their mess. Did they seriously ruin everything over one useless brat? The other guard spat. He swore if he had been there, he would have killed the boy. Suddenly a sound, a strange scratching echoed from the sewer shaft. The guards froze, exchanging nervous looks. Trust me, they had no idea what was coming. Machiavelli had heard enough. In the shadows, he quietly drew his weapon. Muffled gunshots tore through the damp air, instantly dropping the guards. They collapsed instantly, cold, lifeless bodies hitting the hard floor in seconds. Machiavelli stepped out of the darkness, his expression completely blank. He pulled his hood low, adjusting his mask to keep his identity hidden. Nobody could see his face. Machiavelli slowly scanned the bloody area. Memories of a painful past suddenly flashed through his mind. Just before this, he met his comrade and said he made it after all. Hans looked him over, joking that he dressed up and did a lot of preparing. Hans asked if he was going in alone, but Machiavelli just questioned if Hans wanted to help. His ally grinned, saying he could probably knock out several enemies. But the hero shook his head, making it clear he would handle this solo. When asked how many enemies were waiting inside, Hans gave a grim answer. About 40 of them are preparing to leave. In 2 or 3 hours it will make no sense to even go. Hans then asked about their actual combat power. Hans warned him to expect heavily armed guards, including some highly dangerous threats. They had 2 wizards and 3 soldiers in full combat gear waiting inside. Entering through the sewer was their only option, but they had to be careful. Machiavelli nodded, then asked Hans a sudden question about the target family. His ally listened closely as the hero asked about the youngest child. He wanted to know the kid's exact age. Hans thought for a moment. If he remembered correctly, the boy was only 7 years old, still so young. Hearing that, sadness washed over him. At 7 years old, everything finally made sense. He had left immediately after that. Now, those memories fueled his cold rage. As he slaughtered these monsters, Machiavelli pushed forward without a single doubt. He marched directly into the facility where the horrific experiments were taking place. Stepping inside, the absolute darkness of the corridor swallowed him whole. Moments later, terrified screams echoed through the dark as guards realized they had company. Panicked voices demanded to know who he was. Some begged for their lives. Others tried to run, but most were cut down in seconds. He kept advancing. He walked calmly over the dozens of fresh bodies now littering the floor. As he paced forward, a strange mechanical bug began silently trailing behind him. It was bizarre. The tiny insect was likely some sort of high-tech transmitter. Someone was using it to watch his every move from inside the factory. Deep inside the facility, the machines roared and workers bustled around in chaos. Amidst the noise, the technician controlling the bug realized something was very wrong. He quickly warned his partner that they seemed to have an intruder. He wondered aloud if this rat belonged to their own security department. If he is, then we need to lock everything down and start firing people. The technician checked his device and confirmed the intruder was an outsider. This was actually perfect. It meant no one would ask questions when he died. Unbothered by their plans, Machiavelli continued walking deeper into the heart of the factory. When the guards finally spotted him, they instantly opened fire. But their guns clicked uselessly. Not a single bullet would fire. Confused, they yelled in shock, completely unaware that Machiavelli had already cast a spell. His silent magic had completely jammed their weapons, leaving them utterly defenseless. A veteran guard quickly realized they were dealing with a powerful magician. He screamed that guns were useless and ordered everyone to draw their blades. Calmly, Machiavelli reached down toward the weapon resting on his belt. As he reached for his weapon, the head guard watched him and smirked. The guard mocked him, laughing that his gun would not work either in this zone. But the guard never finished his sentence, silenced forever in a single heartbeat. Dead from a single shot, beside him, his partner freezes in sheer panic. Stunned, he stares ahead. He slowly glances down next to him. The lifeless body lies slumped on the table. He whispers that this is impossible. This mage is using magic bullets. Suddenly, a suited enforcer appears. A suited enforcer pushes through the crowd, shouting for everyone to get out of the way. It was his turn now, and his gear was supposedly immune to magic. Clad in heavy tactical armor and wielding a massive electric blaster, he steps up. Instantly, he levels his weapon and unleashes a crackling beam of energy forward. The shooter laughs, mockingly asking his target how he likes the taste of that. And this is where things get genuinely bizarre. His smug grin vanishes. Our protagonist still stands unharmed, holding up a shimmering magical shield to deflect the blast. Shocked, the attacker wonders if this is wind magic bolstered by alchemy. Either way, plain old electricity will not breach his defense. But while the guard stands there frozen in thought, a stray bullet rings out. The round punctures the pressurized generator tank mounted directly onto his back. Whirling around, the man notices the massive breach, leaking raw electrical current. At that exact moment, he realizes that things have gone terribly wrong. Unstable currents erupt outward, violently shocking anyone standing too close. Our hero realizes he has just wiped out yet another wave of hostiles. That makes about 20 bodies so far, but as he calculates his next move, a faint buzzing sound echoes from high above, without pausing to look. He casually raises his weapon and pulls the trigger on pure instinct. The shot strikes a tiny insect hovering near the ceiling, confirming his suspicion. They have been tracking him this entire time using these flying pests. McHavely immediately deduces that these bugs are a network of surveillance cameras. But are they really the same pests he remembers from his previous world? A strong gut feeling tells him a trap is waiting for him ahead. First, he must blind their eyes, watch how he handles this infestation. Stamping his foot down, he channels raw mana and unleashes a magic circle. High-frequency vibrations, completely silent to the human ear, ripple through the corridor. The pulse sweeps through the factory, invisible but absolutely lethal to the pests. It completely overloads their senses, turning the ultrasonic signal into a weapon. Instantly, the swarm hovering in the air begins to malfunction, dropping rapidly. Hundreds of bugs rain down on the concrete floor, miles away, their handler. He suddenly realizes his feedback feed has gone pitch black. The entire surveillance connection is cut off in an instant. But right before the feed cut out, he felt a strange, chilling vibration. Those acoustic waves felt exactly like a high-level wind magic technique. If their target has truly mastered wind, they are in serious trouble. Clearly, tiny scouts are useless here, and it is time to deploy the giants. He quickly warns the Baron to get ready, as things are getting serious. The Baron nods, confirming his men are already in position. According to the map, their target must use the main exit ahead. Heavily armed guards line up by the gate, ordered to show no mercy. But when the doors finally open, a sight awaits that leaves everyone speechless. Simon asks why the power suddenly cut out, complaining they should be faster. Turning on the backup generator is taking way too long, forcing him to complain directly to his partner. He chalks it up to another stupid prank, but his companion says nothing. Wondering what the issue is, Simon glances sideways into the oppressive silence. He turns his head fully, and what he sees next will absolutely make your stomach drop. The man's body is standing upright, but his head is completely gone. It rolls across the cold floor, right to Simon's feet. Simon leaps back in absolute horror, realizing his senior partner was brutally slaughtered seconds ago. Fear takes over. Everything is spiraling completely out of control now. How did an enemy even breach their defenses this quickly in the dark? He needs to strike first, right now, before the shadow closes in and ends him. Reaching down, he pulls a massive, writhing centipede directly out of his left sleeve. The beast starts crawling, but a sudden gunshot shreds it to pieces. Simon's eyes widen in absolute terror as a dark, hooded figure emerges from the heavy shadows. It is the masked protagonist, launching a devastating strike without warning. Simon barely manages to dodge the lethal strike, his heart hammering wildly against his ribs. He is utterly shocked. What kind of mage fights in close combat? This intruder is dangerous, and Simon must keep his distance. But Machiavelli has absolutely no intention of giving him even a single second to breathe. Following up instantly, the hero begins casting a powerful spell. Tracking the enemy's mana, Simon realizes a dangerous flamethrower spell is forming. But he cannot comprehend how this kid channels fire so incredibly fast. There is no time to think because Machiavelli immediately unleashes a roaring torrent of white-hot flames. Searing heat engulfs Simon completely, and he screams in absolute agony. The explosive blast hurls him backward, crashing hard against the floor. Quietly, the hero approaches his burning body, while alarms begin blaring loudly throughout the facility. Outside, the other guards are in absolute chaos over the sudden breach. Their commander instantly realizes things have gone completely south for them. Simon weakly raises his burnt face, only to find a cold gun barrel pointed directly at him. He croaks out a question, but our hero stays dead silent. With a completely merciless expression, the hero fires a single bullet straight through his skull. A nearby guard stammers in utter shock, unable to believe his eyes. How could he kill their elite so easily? Hearing the useless chatter, Machiavelli turns his icy gaze directly toward them. The remaining guards instantly freeze up, completely paralyzed by his terrifying aura. Suddenly, the hero senses a massive, rapid spike of lethal danger coming from his blind spot. Something is lunging at him with absolutely terrifying velocity, forcing a desperate, split-second dodge. He glides backward, narrow-eyed as he identifies the grotesque thing attacking him. It is a massive, segmented insect leg extending from the headless corpse. That decapitated body actually belongs to the Baron, and it is slowly standing back up. Screeching in agony, the decapitated monster complains about how painful the attack was. The voice is completely distorted, coming from a giant mouth on its arm. It admits it never expected such a sudden, vicious assault tonight. Failing to even manifest in time, the beast watched Simon get slaughtered instantly. Machiavelli silently glares at the horrific abomination, sizing up his opponent for the real fight. He wondered if the man could turn into an insect, ignoring his severed head. In response, the monster scoffed, claiming his body had already reached a truly transcendent state. Suddenly, the body that once looked human began to swell up. Within moments, the flesh completely tore apart, revealing another terrifying creature underneath. Machiavelli locked his eyes on the giant insect that appeared before him. Its massive limbs were ready to strike, so the hero quickly stepped back for safety. He lowered his guard slightly for now, watching the monster's next move. The Baron sneered, saying he was not grieving for his dead brother at all. But he still promised to rip Machiavelli into tiny pieces to make him pay. The guards stationed there saw the giant monster and immediately screamed for everyone to run. Unfortunately for them, the beast had no intention of letting them leave alive. It lashed out with its massive limbs, immediately attacking the fleeing crowd. Watching this, Machiavelli wondered if the beast truly cared nothing for his own subordinates. The giant beetle barked back, telling him to stand still if he wanted to save them. Instead, Machiavelli leaped backward, quickly raising his weapon to fire. The bullets slammed directly into the opponent's head, but they did absolutely nothing. The sheer density of his skin completely protected him from any real damage. The Baron immediately lunged forward, trying to crush him with a counterattack. Machiavelli quickly dodged, realizing physical weapons would not work against this monster. So he turned to his magic, preparing the very same flame technique. It was the exact spell he used to incinerate his last opponent. Yet the bug managed to effortlessly dodge the blast, leaving Machiavelli completely stunned. He wondered how a beast with such massive body weight could move so fast. His thoughts were cut short when a massive claw suddenly clamped down on him. The professor groaned in pain as the grip tightened around his body. But knowing the Baron could not dodge at this range, he prepared his magic. The same raging flames from before erupted directly into the monster's face. As the smoke cleared and the spell faded, the beast appeared completely unharmed. Machiavelli stared in disbelief, wondering how the beast withstood a point-blank blast. How could he withstand such a powerful spell at near point-blank range? The giant insect immediately lunged, swinging its claw with brutal force. The beast mocked him, saying he would need level 4 magic to burn him. With a wild laugh, the monster repeatedly smashed its claws against the stone wall. But as the dust settled, the creature realized something was very wrong. Looking down, he realized there was no one left in his grip. Panic set in as he frantically wondered where his opponent had vanished to. The beast looked around wildly, unable to comprehend where the man had gone. Suddenly, his eyes caught a massive object beginning to plummet from the sky. He looked up and instantly spotted a massive threat heading straight down. To protect himself, he slashed hard at a massive falling metal beam. The shattered metal crashed harmlessly to the ground, completely missing its target. Right alongside the falling debris, Machiavelli descended and landed safely in the hall. The Baron grinned, mockingly comparing his agile movements to a winged insect. Machiavelli remained silent, focusing entirely on his strategy going forward. He realized his pistol and third-tier magic were simply not going to cut it. He's completely powerless here. Casting a fourth-level spell is out of the question. There is absolutely zero hope in this situation, and the professor admits he never expected to use his power here. But now he has to unleash it. Even the monster looks on in utter confusion.